We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, as well as some, news and other home theater related topics, stuff like that, and
News.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. I don't remember there being anything exciting that happened in the last week.
It's gonna be home theater focused on this episode because if I stray for 1 second,
you're gonna get us canceled, Rob.
That or just might not get to home theater things. If I didn't have a microphone boom arm in front of me and glasses on, I think I might just be rubbing my eyes the entire
still rub your eyes.
time.
You can rub your eyes. No one's gonna judge you.
For future posterity, we're recording this on July the 16th, 2024. That means this past weekend was July 13th, 2024. Events occurred, if you want to look that up in history.
I was out of town, so no, I was back by then.
Okay.
I don't remember what I was doing. I think I was celebrating my son's 21st birthday that night.
Well, happy birthday to your son. That's a happy thing we can mention.
7-11. That's when his birthday
is.
So, but we celebrated it over the weekend. That was nice.
Yeah.
I should have turned the AC down. I am literally sweating, and this podcast is 2 seconds long, so that's not great.
That's not a great start. I've got 2 fans going on me here, so there might be that.
Yeah, but it's like 13 degrees C over there, and you're like, oh my God, it's so hot. I'm Canadian. I'm melting.
Hot. It's
like 50% snow.
It's like 27 degrees Celsius right now. That's getting way too warm for morning temperatures.
27 degrees Celsius is like it's like 20 degrees Fahrenheit below what it is at all times.
Gonna get up to like 32, 33 today. Wednesday could peak at like 35 Celsius this week.
35 is warm. I'm not gonna
hot.
lie.
That's right around 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
I've been in 40 plus in South Australia.
Yeah,
I think it was Adelaide one time. It was very hot, and those people do not believe in AC.
So one other happy thing I can say is our thank you to Joe Klusnick for guest co-hosting last week while Tom was away. That was very nice of him. Enjoyed.
I listened to every second of it.
I'm sure you did. Tom won't be missing anything that we might reference from what was discussed last week. Knows all about M-Wave now. Just right up to date on everything that happened there.
I don't even know what M-Wave is. I feel like I should.
It's the Midwest audio-video experience.
I definitely was wrong. Yeah. I think I was thinking of Z-Wave. Is that the one that's the home automation thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a different thing.
That is a very, very different thing. A Z-Wave might have been present at M-Wave in some form, but
I was
not out of the question.
That was a deep cut, Rob. They call that a deep cut.
Now, I mentioned this to Joe last week. I have no idea where you were last week, and I don't know if that is publicly shareable information.
Oh, yeah,
so whatever you would like to, whatever you'd like to say. Okay.
Oh, you want me to talk about it now?
Sure. Why not? Okay.
Yeah. So, okay. For those of you that are married, and those of you that may someday want to be married,
okay.
One of the defining moments in a marriage happens when you become an empty nester. What ends up happening when you're an empty nester is you look at your partner and you go, holy crap, I haven't talked to you about anything other than bills and kids for 20 plus years.
Sure.
Like it's a thing, right? And people often split. Like they're like, oh, they were staying together for the kids.
That happens.
Sometimes they are staying together for the kids, and sometimes the kids leave and they look at each other and they go, I don't even know you anymore. Like, I don't even remember why we got married. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways that I personally have been combating that eventuality, because I still have a kid in high school, but I have 2 one that's gone but back because they boomerang like crazy in this generation, which I'm not complaining about because I love having them around.
Pretty hard to blame the kids on that one, honestly.
Yeah, really. It's school costs. Like I used to be able to deliver pizzas and put myself through school. That's not really the way it is anymore.
Or like me, I could work at a video store and afford to rent an apartment, Yeah,
right.
And that's not that long ago. I'm not that old.
So my middle son is about to go away to college, and my youngest one, of course, is in high school. So one of the ways I'm combating that is making sure that my wife and I spend some time together and talk about things that are not the kids.
Yeah.
So we haven't been doing that lately because finances have been tight, and you know how things go, school ending and all of that. And we started to bicker. And I was like, okay, we need to do something together. We need to do something together.
Yeah.
So my son is, my youngest son was at a Boy Scout camp. He's part of 2 different Boy Scout troops, or Scout troops. I don't call them Boy Scouts anymore. So the 2 different Scout troops. And the 2 Scout troops were going to the same camp in sorry, I hit the microphone. Subsequent weeks. Okay. So the Boy Scout, the Scout camps are open for an entire week.
Yeah.
And then, but that's the 2 just coincidentally, they were both going
straight from one to another.
Right, but it's at the same location.
Oh, okay.
So they were both going to the same location, but on different weeks.
Okay.
So my son at that particular camp, they have I won't call it a low camp. They'll have a regular camp, which the scouts go there and they get to do a bunch of stuff and get a bunch of merit badges and all of that. My son almost has just about every merit badge you can get at a place like this. He's been scouting for a long time, and he loves participating in this stuff. So he really didn't have much else to do. But so the first week he did the quote unquote low camp, or the regular camp, with 1 troop, and then the second week he was going to do the high camp, which is a high adventure camp, which was an entire week of whitewater rafting.
Wow.
Which he has done before, and he loved it, and he's doing it again. I've done whitewater rafting. It is great, fine, whatever. But after the first time, I was like, I can never do this again.
Yeah, an entire week of it? Yeah, that's quite a bit.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, but in between is a weekend, and he cannot stay there. They're like, you must take your child from us overnight, pick him up Saturday, bring him back Sunday, but he must not be here. For no one will watch him. He cannot stay here. So we turned it into a trip. We left on July 4th because traffic was low. We went up to Atlanta, where my wife's aunt lives, and we stayed with them. And then we went over to Tennessee, where my friend lives, and we stayed with him. And then he was in this camp in North Carolina, which was about a 2-hour drive from my friend's house in Knoxville, which was a great town, by the way. If you've ever had a chance to be in Knoxville feels a lot like Boulder, Colorado. If you've been there, it feels like that. It's very outdoorsy, lots of hills, river goes through it. There's all sorts of outdoorsy activities to do. Very active city, very much liked it. It was still southern, had that southern sort of. There's far too many politically based T-shirts with people with mugshots on them flipping me off as they walk through restaurants. But other than that, it was fine. And then the people are very nice, from the ones I met. And so we picked him up, and then we spent 1 day with him, then brought him back, and then we spent a couple more days in Knoxville, and then we came home. So it was just sort of a nice time for my wife and I to reconnect and to drive a bajillion hours in my new to me Honda CRV, which is a 2015 CRV. And let me tell you something about that car. It gets great, compared to our other cars, gets great gas mileage.
Yeah, it is a fuel efficient vehicle.
What it does not have are comfortable seats.
Yeah.
they are fine for around town. But after about 2 hours, I was like, I got to get out of this car. This is not
would not
great.
be classified as a luxury vehicle.
No, would not. But for our normal everyday use, it was great. So it was a good time. I got to see my friend, who's my middle son's godfather. I did that because I like this guy a lot, and I want him to be in my life for as long as I could wrangle him in there. And I did that by asking him to be my son's godfather. I was like, you got to stick around now. But he's a super nice guy. We stayed with him. He's also a bachelor, which is, I guess, only relevant because I like to tell the joke that when we were there, we used his spoon because he only has one because he's a bachelor.
That is bachelor life.
We're like, he's like, oh, I got cereal. And we're like, where are all the spoons? He's like, well, I think it's in, I think the spoon is in the dishwasher. I'm like,
I have plenty of spoons. They're just the disposable variety, because why do dishes?
It's what he does too. He has all this disposable stuff. So it was very fun. We had a very good time. But that's where I was at. And I wasn't sure when I was leaving or coming back. There was a chance I would come back on Monday. But I wanted to leave that open for my wife to decide. And we ended up coming back very, very late on a Tuesday.
Okay.
So
honestly, it worked out quite nicely because
thank you, Joe, for filling in for me.
Catching up on that event was nice, and got some good discussion there. So all right, well, that's good.
What did we watch, Rob?
Good stuff. Indeed. What did we watch? I have an apology to issue before I say what I did watch, because I told Andrew, you're a good friend there from AV Gadgets, my good friend as well. I promised him that this week I was going to watch the movie Upgrade that he's been like excited for me to see and talk about on the podcast. Yeah, I think it's from like 2018. It's a Lee Wan-el film. He wrote and directed it, and it's like very stunt-based, very stunt-based movie. Anyway, Andrew was very excited for me to watch it, and I promised him I would this week, and I'm really sorry, Andrew. It did not happen. I did fully intend to, as time got away from me, other things got in the way, and yeah,
that's all right. You can watch it next week.
It will. I will have it. I will have it there for next week. So I only watched one movie this week, which was The Girl on the Train. So that is starring Emily Blunt. Also has, I didn't know before this going into it, Rebecca Ferguson co-stars in this movie. Lisa Kudrow has a small role in this, and there are basically three main women in this film. Emily Blunt is very much the lead, and she is the only person whose narration we hear from coming from inside of her head. The other two female leads, they also have narration, but it is actually them speaking out loud. So there's that little distinction that we're only getting the inside of the head thoughts from Emily Blunt's character. But there's also an actress, Haley Bennett, who was very, very good, and I did not recognize her from anything. And I was surprised because this is like a all-star cast in this. Everybody in this movie is a well-known actor, well-established, very, very good, everybody in this movie. And then Haley Bennett is there, and she was right there up alongside everybody else's performance, but I just didn't recognize her from anything. She bears a pretty strong resemblance to Jennifer Lawrence, honestly, quite a few angles. They have very similar facial structures. But yeah, I didn't recognize her from anything. But yeah, she was really good in this movie too. So this is a murder mystery. This is an unreliable narrator in the form of Emily Blunt, which is one of my favorite things in writing. I love an unreliable narrator, an unreliable memory that she has due to her alcoholism, which is very prominent. And my goodness, Emily Blunt was convincing and good at playing teetering on the edge of blackout drunk at all possible moments. She did an excellent job. Also, because she's Emily Blunt, they have that thing where it's like, yeah, her makeup was like making her, you know, they put additional like shadows under her eyes and try to make her look kind of disheveled and stuff, but she's still Emily Blunt, so like that worked really well of being like, well, she still ain't ugly no matter how much you try to ugly her up. Everybody in this movie is kind of stupidly good looking, but that's a bit of this movie as well, what's going on, because there's lots of affairs and cheating going on and people wishing they had other people's lives, and then somebody is killed and who did it, and there's really quite a small cast of characters, so it's pretty limited as to who it actually might have been in this, but they did a good job of throwing up all the red herrings and making it seem like it could have been any one of these people. Everybody had motive, everybody had opportunity, and of course, one by one, they whittle it down. There is some overt audience misdirection, like outright lying to the audience. There's a little bit of that in this movie, which isn't my favorite thing for a story to do. Well, maybe that's a little harsh. I mean, they are very strongly leading you to believe that an event occurred that didn't actually occur, right? So it's like, in a way that, okay, I guess they didn't actually show you the wrong thing, but there was no way you could have thought it was anything else at the time that they were showing it. So, and then they come back later and retcon that, and it's like, nope, it was actually something else. So yes, there is story manipulation here. Of course, if you just saw all of the events played out in chronological order, there wouldn't be much of a mystery to it at all. But this is more about the emotional journey, the mental struggle that Emily Blunt's character in particular is going through. But then she is looking at these other two women and thinking that their lives are so much better, and we get some insights into their lives. And of course, their lives are not actually so much better as much as Emily Blunt is imagining them to be. So I quite liked this movie. It's not like laugh a minute or anything like that. It's some pretty down stuff, but the performances are also good. There are little moments of humor in it and stuff like that to bring the levity up a little bit. Everybody in this movie is kind of awful, but at least sympathetically awful. So it wasn't like another movie I watched not that long ago.
All kind of awful, Rob.
Sure,
I mean, if there really was an FBI or CIA agent watching my life, you go, that was kind of a jerk move, Tom.
That's right.
Every once in a while.
Everybody
once in a while,
movie...
he go, you know what? That was really nice. Yep. So, I mean, we're all kind of a little
Everybody in this movie makes mistakes, and not always for, completely altruistic reasons that just happen to go wrong. Some people are outright trying to be a little bit malicious here and there. But people were sympathetic. So, I give The Girl on the Train a thumbs up.
All right. I have been gone for 2 weeks, so yes. I watched more stuff than you, and most of it happened last night.
Okay, that's fair enough.
So while I was gone, we stayed at my wife's aunt's house for the night, and they wanted to watch the new Beverly Hills Cop movie.
Okay.
With the Axel F.
That's Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F.
I don't understand why that F, what that's supposed to be. Is it AF?
I don't know enough
for here.
I don't know enough about Beverly Hills Cop to fill in all the context on there.
I don't know that I've seen every single Beverly Hills Cop movie, to be honest with you. I think there's 3 or 4 of them before this one.
That sounds right. There's at least 2. I think there's...
I know I saw the first 2. I don't know that I've seen any since then. So I don't really remember. I kind of remember some of the characters. And there was definitely references, callbacks to the other movies that I wasn't getting because I haven't seen those movies probably since the year they came out on VHS.
And this is streaming only, right? This did not go to theaters. Yeah. Okay.
No, it did not. I mean, it could have gone to theaters. I've seen worse things in theaters. This was not a bad movie by any stretch of the... I mean, and that sounds like I'm about to bag on it. I'm not. I think there was a lot of interesting choices made here. Eddie Murphy looks... I've seen him recently in interviews and stuff like that, and obviously he's aged. Obviously he's a little bigger than he used to be when he was this totally thin little rail guy, and that's fine that he's now older. He's playing an older person. He's playing a father.
I would kind of hope that they've done a bit of a time skip.
Yeah, so I mean it sort of works. Some of the gags, some of the character himself, the way that character was, and how he acted and got away with things, this sort of false bravado in order to trick, to weasel his way into situations where people give him information that he needs, sort of doesn't quite ring as realistic as maybe it did when these movies first came out. I was like, I think you're going to get shot, dude. I don't know how you made it this far in life. Right. You're old enough now where you shouldn't be doing that anymore, and you're still kind of doing it. Sure. At some point, it should have backfired. At some point, somebody should have just gone, you're not who you say you are, boom, and that'd been the end of that. So maybe that choice for other people was fine. The thing that I really liked about this movie is the relationship between him and his daughter. Okay. So the whole thing, for those of you that haven't watched it, is him and his daughter are estranged. And unlike many action movies, of which this is sort of an action-y sort of movie, they take the time between action scenes for these two people to have conversations and deal with their relationship and try to repair it or whatever. And it rang true enough that first of all, my parents are estranged from some of my siblings, and it rang true to me. And the people I was watching it with, one of them, it was super triggering for them because it rang true enough for them that it was hard. It was hard for them to watch those particular scenes, which I think is a great endorsement of the movie. Now, if you're like, I don't want to have emotions during my movies. Well, I'm sorry. Sometimes emotions happen. But for me, that was the best part. It wasn't particularly funny, I thought. There were some funny moments. Yeah. But, the action was all pretty good. And, I did like that they tried to lean into the fact that he was a father, he was older, he was still kind of doing all this goofy stuff. And they did bring back sort of the old cast. And Judge Reinhold, I think is his name, the actor. Man, that guy is not... I mean, and no offense to that dude, but man, he looks rough. He looks a little bit... He looks a little bit like him and Mickey Rourke went down the same... the same path. Yeah. So, and hey, if you look at me when I was young and compared to now, I haven't exactly aged gracefully either. So I feel you. So if you like the Beverly Hills Cop, I think the series, you're gonna like this movie.
Okay.
And even if you don't, I think there's enough in here for you to watch it and go, I'm not getting all the callbacks, and clearly that's a callback, but you'll still enjoy the movie. It won't be a waste of your time.
I'm quite surprised that didn't go to theaters, and I haven't watched it, but my favorite thing coming out of that is the promotion and Eddie Murphy just ruining all of DreamWorks' announcement plans. He's just like, yeah, there's a Shrek 4. Yeah, there's a Donkey, or a Shrek 5 and a Donkey spinoff. And they're like, well, we were going to announce Shrek 5 next week, and we weren't going to announce the Donkey spinoff for a while, but thanks, I guess that's out there now.
I missed all that. So
yeah, that was funny.
All right. So for those of you that are living under a rock like I did, I watched all of Tales from the Empire last night because they're all
Tales from the Empire.
Yeah,
okay.
There's 6 episodes. There's three episodes and 3 episodes, and they're little story arcs for two characters.
Is animated,
much like Tales of the Jedi.
Okay, gotcha.
I think that the same sort of thing. So there's 3 episodes with Morgan and Morgana, whatever her name was, that she showed up. She was the witch lady that showed up in
Ahsoka.
Yeah, Ahsoka.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like her backstory. I was like, is this where I'm supposed to know her from? Because I definitely watched Ahsoka and went, who is this person? And why,
I had a bit of
why
that
are they talking to me like I should know them? Because I don't remember them being in the Rebels, which was the thing before. Maybe
I watched all the
it?
Rebels. Nope, she wasn't in there. Nope.
So anyways, if you're wondering what her history is, she's in the first 3 episodes. The second 3 episodes are about an Inquisitor, a person who becomes an Inquisitor.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's fine. It's fine.
I mean, it is funny that there's all this stuff that, like, the Inquisitors were never in any of the 9 movies, right? Like, if you're just going by the 9 main Star Wars movies, we never had Inquisitors in any of those. Yeah. That's just entirely additional content stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the Inquisitors. I think they're very cool. I think they're a great addition. So I'm not going to bag them all.
Like when they talked about the Knights of Ren, I was like, those should be Inquisitors. That's what those should turn out to be. They were basically absolutely nothing. But, there's stuff like that.
Let's not talk about those.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's not talk about the movie.
Doesn't need to be belabored.
I hate so much. Okay. And then, of course, I'm all caught up on the Acolyte. And,
as am I. And this was another thing, Andrew from AV Gadgets. He was like, what do you guys think of the Acolyte? I'm like, wait for the podcast. We'll talk about it.
I am loving it. I am absolutely loving it. I know that Rob, I watched the one episode, I think it's 4, where I was
got to be episode 5.
4 or 5 or whatever it is, where Rob is like, I'm like, ooh, Rob's mad. Rob just got mad.
Yeah. That's episode 5.
The one thing, if I can just say one thing that I like that they're doing, but it bugs me that it has to be done, is George Lucas in the prequels made the Jedi just, I mean, they were jumping up 50-foot, 60-foot, 100-foot things off their fingertips.
They were very superpowered.
Yes, and Jedi are no longer, like, in no other movies are the Jedi like that. And I there's this scene where Saul is having to climb the outside of this rock, this building that's built into like a mountain. So he's climbing the mountain to get to the top. I'm like, Ewan McGregor just jumped up that damn thing. I mean, it would just been like, I'm up at the top. That would have been the end of that. Yeah, it would have been like 2 hops and a skip. And
Anakin would have been the whole thing. Obi-Wan might have been half of it.
Anakin would just picked it up with the Force. But yes, I do like that they've gotten rid of that aspect of the Jedi, because I was always like, wait a second.
Well, not gotten rid of. This is earlier. This is earlier than all of the
whatever.
Movies.
So for those of you that don't know, hopefully you're watching this if you're not, but one of the characters in there is played by the same actor who's on The Good Place.
Yes, he is.
And he is, I'm going to be honest with you guys, he is so good in this that I started watching it and went, man, he reminds me of Jason from The Good Place. And I was like, man, I can't believe they cast somebody that looks so much like him, but it's clearly not, because this guy is completely different. And I went and looked it up. I was like, holy crap, it is Jason.
That's right.
He is so good in this. He is so good.
Yeah.
And in fact, I like everybody that's in this. This, and there's so much stuff that's going on all over the place. I'm like, they can build off of this series.
Oh, there's many things that could be done. Yes,
so
they can
much.
go earlier. They can go later.
Yes.
Yes.
I love what's going on with it. And of course, I think the last episode, right? It's going to come out today. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, as we're recording this, the eighth and final episode of the season.
I'll be honest with you. I'm like, I think it's too fast. I think they should have a couple of more episodes here.
I mean, it seems pretty clear they're not going to wrap up everything that's been laid out there in this final episode. So they're setting up for a second season.
I really like how this is going. This is it's not super like twisty turny, but it's twisty turny enough that you're like, oh, I didn't think they were going to go there. like Star Wars tends to be pretty safe. You know, you kind of know the formula of what's going to happen. They're not exactly trying to reinvent the wheel over there. No. And this takes enough risks or it twists enough things on their heads that you're like, huh. And I'm so interested in almost all the characters and their backstories. Okay. The little girl's story is sort of interesting, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't care that much about them. I care about everybody else so much more. Like, tell me more about their moms. Tell me more about the big bad evil person. You know what I mean?
Who
Tell
really
me
doesn't
more
have
about
a name yet. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, tell me about all this stuff. Like, I am so interested. So yes, I am totally hooked on the Acolyte. It is great.
I want to like it a lot more than I genuinely feel like I do. I'm not quite sure what it is, and honestly, I think a huge amount of it is everything else going on around in my life and not the show in any way, because I don't think I've actually devoted it my true full attention while I've been watching it. I've been a bit distracted while I've watched these episodes, so I don't think the show is to blame, and I don't really trust my own judgment of it at this moment. Is my true. That's the only thing I can say, because I'm not completely feeling it and loving it. I'm like, I want to, and I'm not quite sure why, but I'm pretty sure it's not the show's fault. So I'm going to abstain from saying that. I'm going to go back and watch the whole thing through again at another time, because I haven't completely given it its due.
I think that the thing with me is that I have mostly watched it in like little spurts. Okay. So I've watched multiple episodes at a time to catch up. So you get more, like, that's the way I felt about Ahsoka too. When I first started watching Ahsoka, I was like, each episode was so like, what's the heck's going on here? Like, I don't really know these people. I don't know what's going on. And then when I watched it all together, I was like, whoa, this actually really ramped up. And I felt that way about this too. Okay. So, there's quite a bit. I think that for me, at least, the fact that I'm all watching it, multiple episodes at the same time, kind of gets me a little bit more. That binge watch has been a little bit better.
And I know about myself, like, I'm very much someone who I tend to pick one or two characters who are my favorite, and I like, this is everything that I watch. And so as long as those one or two characters are doing interesting things, then I'll judge an entire show more positively than maybe it deserves in that. And it's like, I already told you who my favorite character was, and Tom can smile behind the scenes because he knows what goes on. And then I'm like, I didn't really find anybody else that I immediately connected to. I like Saul. I find him interesting, but I didn't. There's some little gap there between Saul and I that I didn't completely like love him. So I didn't find anybody else that I like really connected with, and so that's what's missing for me a little bit. So I'm very much interested in the big bad guy as well. So I'm like, okay, if something really cool happens in the last episode, that's gonna like color everything for me and make me want to go back and watch the whole thing again with that in mind. So that's where I am at the moment.
I understand that. I think that's a fair criticism as well. And I guess the thing that I find most interesting is that the Jedi as a whole have always been sort of unidimensional. Even with
I've always kind of liked about Star Wars. Like, I've enjoyed that Star Wars is black and white, good and evil, not really any question or gray area. And then there are tons of people who are like, I want more gray area. We're starting to get shows with more gray area now. And I don't always love those. But then I loved Andor, and that was all gray area. So,
but I guess with this, I don't feel like it's so much a gray area as we are seeing the Jedi as,
fallible.
At different levels where you've got your acolytes, or no, I shouldn't say acolytes. I guess your Padawans who are making mistakes and making bad choices and stuff, and then
Masters too making some pretty bad mistakes.
Right at the same time, and the Jedi to me in this, because it's supposed to be set pretty far in the past, the Jedi to me feel young. Yeah. You know, and
although they shouldn't, because they're still thousands of years old as an order at this point.
Yeah,
this is only 100 years before the Star Wars saga.
Yeah, so it's very. They feel a little bit younger and a little more impulsive and a little more. You know,
well, this group, right? We're following one little group of Jedi, and they're well. I mean, one of them's supposed to be an outright master, so what excuse do they have? But the rest, they're all younger and making their mistakes. All right, we got oodles of questions this week, so we
all right, let's get to it. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to the website, avrant.com. You can find our old episodes, our show notes, as well as our Flickr album, so you can follow along with the pictures that we will be talking about in this podcast, during this podcast. Facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com /avrant. Our live recording sessions, Rob will flash up on the screen.
Yep.
Those same pictures, so you could press play on YouTube, look away until we say something about the picture, and look back. And
That's
there
right.
It'll be on your...
That'll be the best way to do it.
75-inch OLED that you bought based on a recommendation.
Yes, that's right. 115-inch TCL. You spent that $20,000. I know you did.
Yeah, you did. Contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and that'll send you to a PayPal donation site. And this week, we're going to thank Brandon for doing that.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you very much for your PayPal donation. Certainly appreciate that. Were we correct? Did Sasi actually send in the PayPal donation last week? Did you see that name?
I did.
There it is.
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Thank you, Sasi. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Sasi. Thank you, Brandon. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. You can sign up to become a monthly contributor to our podcast, supporter, subscriber. I don't know what they're calling them these days. We have currently 131 patrons.
That's right.
Thank you to all of you.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up or re-sign up, because some dropped off. Maybe that was just credit card stuff at the beginning of the month. It definitely often happens. But yeah, 131 patrons over there giving us financial support, and we very much appreciate it.
We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through the nothing that happened in the United States this week. Nothing happened. Nothing newsworthy at all.
Not that we are going to
talk
about
we are
here.
not home theater related, at least.
It was not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Notes of gratitude from Dan, Sasi, Greg. Greg says he finds our podcast to be a nice change of pace from most of the other home theater discussions online. So much of it now is influencers, advertising, or wealth porn, in his opinion. It's not an opinion. That is a straight up fact. It is so disturbing. It's like, oh, look at these speakers that are, whatever, $250,000. Yeah, the speakers that are in the center of a room next to one chair with no wires coming out of them.
No wires anywhere.
Yeah, because that would mess up the picture. So stupid. While there's a local home theater group in this area that all they seem to care about is getting 140 dB down at 10 hertz. So he's glad we're not like any of that.
Yeah.
140 dB. Like your house hears it, I guess. He also agreed with Rob's advice to Joe to get a Denon A1H instead of a Marantz AV10. He grabbed an A1H when Denon themselves had it on sale for only $4,500 at one point. And for all it does, it was a steal at that price. Rest assured, it can perform flawlessly as a pre-pro. So thank you to Dan, Sasi, and Greg for thanking us.
For sure, Dan, Sasi, and Greg, thank you for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. Encouragement needed these days, certainly this week. So very much appreciated. A big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right, in the home theater news and not other news of which we will not speak. SVS has added a new accessory device to their SoundPath series, the SVS SoundPath speaker level subwoofer adapter for $80. I can't really understand how they did how they got this thing to go through. I think it's great. I love that we have it.
I like the device, yes.
But I'm like, somebody must have done the calculation. How many of these are we going to sell? And somebody went, probably not that many.
Because this is maybe about $1.80 worth of parts inside here. So yeah, there's a pretty good margin on this one, I gotta say.
I think that's how they're justifying it. I love that it exists.
Yep.
I don't care about the price tag, because if you need it, you need it. Really,
you buy it once, and there it is.
So it's a simple passive device, but it serves a useful purpose for any situation where you have speaker wire outputs, but need a line level connection. Okay, so this is when your audio file, amplifier or processor or whatever.
Integrated amp very often.
Does
Stereo
not have
amplifier.
a subwoofer output, a line level subwoofer output. So what are you going to do? So this is what you're going to do. You're going to buy this thing. Just plug your left and right speaker wire outputs from your audio amplifier or AV receiver into the SoundPath speaker level subwoofer adapter, and will convert those amplified signals into a left and right RCA line level outputs that you can plug into any powered subwoofer. Naturally, you'll need to use the subwoofer's own low pass filter, often labeled the crossover knob, to filter out higher frequencies and create a good blend between your subwoofer and your speakers. SVS also mentions that this can be a good use case for their own SoundPath by-wire speaker cables, since those allow you to plug the single end of your amplifier or AV receiver and then plug one half of the split end into your speaker and the other half of the split end into the speaker level adapter. How convenient.
That's right.
That's an actual
I don't mind that. That's actually more useful than by-wiring to one pair of speakers. So there you go. I'm all right with that.
So Rob immediately emailed SVS to ask if the new speaker-level subwoofer adapter could be used full range to turn a speaker binding post output into a speaker pre-out for any given speaker channel. And indeed, the specs and SVS's own design team say that the adapter works perfectly linearly from 10 hertz, so for those people trying to get 140 dB, to 80 kilohertz, which is bats, I think. It's totally fine to use it for a full range signal. So for any AV receivers that don't have a full set of pre-outs, this could be a solution if you ever wanted to add external amplification at $80 a pop, or if you want to connect, say, your self-powered surround speakers to a wireless audio adapter. It does not work the other way around, though. It won't turn the RCA level line level signal into an amplified speaker wire output. There's no amplification inside. But wherever you need an RCA line level pre-out, but only have speaker wire binding posts available, this will work. I guess that's interesting, huh? That you need to split your speaker wire, so your speakers are still getting full range.
That's right.
And there's no output on this, so it doesn't. Right.
It's not splitting anything. It's not filtering anything. It's not high pass filtering or anything. It is just a converter. It is an amplified speaker wire signal converter to regular RCA line level. That's what it is. But when you don't have a dedicated subwoofer output, it's handy. Or there's plenty of AV receivers, that under $1,000, almost everything under $1,000 doesn't have pre-outs. And if you're just like, well, I would like to use an external amplifier for my front, left, and right tower speakers or something like that. We get people who ask about that, not infrequently. And it's like, but I don't have any pre-outs. So I have to buy an entire new AV receiver, spend over $1,000 for a new AV receiver just to get a set of pre-outs. That's all I really want. It's like, well, no, this could do it. That's good. I like that.
So you're plugging two different devices into one speaker level output on your AV receiver. I'm surprised that there's not any sort of warning about impedance or any of that. I wonder how they're dealing with that. But anyways, so it's two channels per each one of these boxes.
That's right. Left and right only.
So, and it doesn't have to be left and right front. It could be left and right surround back to left and right, or just, I don't know, center and another speaker. It doesn't really care as long as it's going in there. Xbox Game Pass subscriptions are changing. Probably for the better, one would think, as these things often do. I will say that on my social media, I have seen a lot of people talking about this, and I scroll past it because I don't care.
Yeah.
And getting more expensive starting in September. Surprise, surprise, that's right before Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is scheduled to make its debut following Microsoft's acquisition of Activision.
Yep.
Let's go through what Game Pass will cost you starting in September, shall we? We shall, I guess. Some time ago, Xbox Live Gold was replaced with Game Pass Core that gave you access to online multiplayer gaming, and instead of giving subscribers a couple of free games every month like Gold used to, Are you snoring? Oh my God, this dog. You got a limited selection of the Game Pass library of games, about 30 of them. It costs $10 a month, but if you paid for a whole year at once, it was only $60, half the price. Xbox Game Pass Core will continue to cost $10 a month in September, but the price for a whole year all at once will increase to $75. Let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, since that's easy to explain. The Game Pass Ultimate gives you online multiplayer gaming, the full Game Pass library, including day one game releases, Xbox Cloud Gaming.
That's the game streaming. That's streaming games, so it's on their servers and it's just streaming to you.
and which I think you can do with a Amazon.
That's our next news story there. So.
Oh, okay. And EA Play. It works on both consoles and PCs. It used to cost $17 a month. Starting in September, it'll cost $20 a month. Simple as that.
It's just a straight up price increase. That one is easy to explain.
Then there was the PC Game Pass. It only worked on PCs, not consoles. It gave you the full Game Pass library, including day one games and EA Play. It used to cost $10. Now it's going to cost $12.
There you go. Another one, easy to understand. Price went up.
Now, these are the more complicated parts.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me just tell you. People who are doing these things, this includes like those pre-release, pre-order bundle things. Yeah. If you need a frickin' spreadsheet to explain your pricing, it is wrong. It needs to be easier than that. There was the Xbox Game Pass console. It gave you the full Game Pass library, including day one games, but that was it. It did not give you online multiplayer gaming. Why would you want that? And it did not give you EA Play or anything on PC. It cost $11 a month. So if you wanted to play Game Pass library and multiplayer, online multiplayer, it usually made more sense to just get the Ultimate. But starting, I guess now, Xbox Game Pass console is no longer available. If you already have it and you've stacked a bunch of months up ahead of time, it'll still work for 13 more months. Yeah. But adding any more Game Pass console subscription is gone now. Sort of in its place is a new Game Pass standard tier.
Yes.
It gives you online multiplayer gaming, which apparently you didn't want before, but now you got it anyways.
That's right.
It gives you the full Game Pass library, but not day one games.
Which was the only thing anyone wants from Game Pass.
No EA Play, no cloud gaming, and it's $15 a month.
Yeah.
Day one games will be added to Game Pass standard for some 6 to 12 months after initial release, decided on a case-by-case basis. You must go, please, sir, may I have the day one game? And they'll be like, I'm sorry, street urchin. Go back to your hovel where you can play nothing.
So, I mean, look, realistically, you got Game Pass Core. Okay, $10 a month or $75 a year. You want your online gaming? That used to be Xbox Live Gold. The whole Xbox Live Gold and Silver thing is completely gone now. Everything is called Game Pass. We had Game Pass Core that got you your online gaming, and they give you like 25, 30 games, and that rotates. That selection of games rotates. None of them are day one games. They're all older games. We get those, and that's it. Okay, that makes sense. Game Pass Standard is exactly the same thing, but just more games. That's it. For $15 a month. There's no annual plan available. There's no game streaming. And the only thing anybody wants from Game Pass, the day one games, not there, because they have to incentivize you to get Game Pass Ultimate. What purpose does Standard serve? Who is the customer who went, okay, what I want most is online gaming, but I'll pay $5 more than Core to get the standard package of Xbox Game Pass games. I can't stream them. I still have to have a whole console. I still have to download them. And it's not the day one games, the ones that have the obvious value. How is that worth $5 a month more than the monthly subscription to Game Pass Core, or twice the price of the annual subscription to Game Pass Core? Why wouldn't you just get Game Pass Core and then buy a few games? I don't know what Standard is. Standard makes no sense to me. If it didn't have the day one games...
They don't want you to buy it. They don't want you to buy it. They want you to
get Ultimate, yes. Yeah. I mean, that was clear. They're like, how are we going to make... Because, look, if Game Pass Standard...
What can we take away from you in order to make you spend the more money?
If Game Pass Standard had the full library of games and day one games, and what it didn't have was game streaming, EA Play, and everything to do with PCs, right? If Ultimate gave you everything on PCs as well as consoles, plus cloud streaming and EA Play, or maybe even more games. Maybe Ultimate had, 200 games instead of 100, and Standard had 100, but included the day one. Then I would be like, people would be all over Standard. Because there's a ton of people who are like, I don't care about EA Play, I don't care about cloud streaming, I don't care about gaming on PC, but what I want are the day one games, and that's about it. Game Pass Standard would have represented a $2 savings per month over the old Ultimate, and people would have been all over it. If this was supposed to be about getting more people to join Game Pass in some form, Standard could have been an easy knock it out of the park, grand slam home run for them, but they decided not to do that and to make it something that makes no sense to me. Weird. Hope they change it. They won't.
So there's a weird noise coming from my house. I'm going to go check it out in a second.
It seems.
Hopefully it's not. I'm not being home invaded.
One would hope.
One would hope. But,
that dog next to you is sure protecting you if that's the case.
The one who's snoring?
That's
yes.
Right.
He's got my back.
On the spot right there.
If you've ever really wanted somebody to lick you, he's the one. He's just happy. If you open the door, he's out anyway. So if somebody wanted to home invade me, they just open the door and there goes the dog. All those Xbox Game Pass prices increases got you down? Well, if you subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate and therefore have access to Xbox Cloud game streaming, turns out you don't need an Xbox console anymore. Instead, you can just use an Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen or a Fire TV Stick 4K Max.
Yep.
The Xbox app is officially available for those devices now, and it supports Xbox Cloud game streaming. If you don't have a Game Pass Ultimate subscription, you can play Fortnite for free.
Yep.
And it's limited in all cases to HD resolution with 5.1 audio, no 4K, no HDR, no Atmos. So that's fine.
Yep.
No one really cares.
No.
I mean, I'm sure somebody cares, but those people can't buy consoles. So there you go. I feel like the game industry is in absolute turmoil. To be honest with you, like the console industry is like, I don't know if we can keep making these things. We keep losing money on them.
I feel like Microsoft is discovering that the streaming subscription thing is facing the exact same dilemma as all of the movie streaming. Turns out you don't make a profit, but they are trying to force it down everybody's throat.
So The Verge obtained leaked information about Sonos' next Atmos soundbar codenamed Lasso. As in Ted.
Yeah.
I hope it's because of Ted.
Maybe they actually used the Ted Lasso font at one point.
Did they really?
So yes, they do know the connection.
I thought it was going to be like the string, the rope. It'll supposedly cost $1,200, which, I mean, it's Sonos. So, it's a feature to be expensive, by the way. It's like buying a Cybertruck, which is a sizable price increase over the ARC soundbar. It's supposed to produce a lot more bass on its own since Sonos wants to market it as not requiring an additional subwoofer. God. Help me have strength to not to deal with all that. You don't need a subwoofer with this.
A lot of people bought Sonos ARC soundbars, didn't add the Sonos sub, and then complained it didn't have enough bass, but weren't willing to pay the overpriced amount for a Sonos sub.
So let's build it in and charge you anyways.
That's right.
And it'll be using new driver technology based on technology from the company
I have no idea how to pronounce that
May
company.
HT or Mycat. That they acquired in 2022. Whatever, stupid name. Maybe it means something in another language, in which case it's fine, but whatever. It'll support Bluetooth, Atmos, and the new Sonos headphones. ARC didn't have Bluetooth support, so that's worth however many bajillion extra dollars it is. That's fine. Whatever. It's fine.
Let's go on.
Comments. Infinite Gary has a shout out for SVS's customer service while moving around the speakers in one of his setups. He accidentally had a speaker slip down and land on the RCA plug sticking out of the back of his SVS PB2000 Pro sub. It damaged the RCA jack. If you're looking at the images, I mean, I think removed. It looks more accurate than damaged.
That is definitely damage.
Yeah.
No question.
But a quick call to SVS was all it took to have a replacement amp sent on its way to him, not having to speak to a supervisor or anything. Just a quick explanation of what happened, the photo of the damage, and serial number was all it took. SVS shipped him a replacement amp, no charge. The very next day, sent him instructions for how to do the replacement, as well as telling him to just dispose of the damaged amp at his local recycling center. 2 days later, the new amp arrived, and we have a picture of that as well. If you ever want to know what the inside of an amp looks like, it looks like this.
That's it. I gotta say, that's above and beyond. That is not like manufacturer defect. That is not their product stopped working because of something that SVS did wrong on their end. This was accidental damage on the part of the customer. Many warranties say, hey, we don't cover accidental damage, and I don't blame them because but SVS, they're like, hey, that's fine. It's not like Gary's going to them every single week and trying to do this thing. They're like, hey, let's make it right. They send him the replacement amp. That's awesome.
So all this happened in the midst of Gary trying out a new pair of speakers, a new speaker stands as well. He got a pair of Philharmonic BMR monitors, and since they're quite tall for non-tower speakers, he needed a pair of shorter stands. So he decided to try a pair of 18-inch monoprice monolith stands, since we've recommended them in the past. They are nice. I think I use them. Yeah. Those are the two pole ones, right?
Yeah, there's kind of like two tubes that are sticking.
They
up
do
there.
Loosen up after sometimes. So you want to either put some Loctite on the screws, or just occasionally go back and tighten them up. He's really happy with both. He heard some details in familiar recordings that he's never noticed before while auditioning the Philharmonic BMR monitors, and the monolith stands ended up being perfect, enough so that he's decided to replace the speaker stands for the rest of the speakers in this room so they all match in appearance. When you turn the lights off and everything's black anyways, but whatever. So all in all, a great experience all around. Lastly, he mentioned how plugging his integrated amplifier into an Isotech power conditioner eliminates a hum and noise floor coming from his speakers whenever the integrated amp was plugged directly into the wall. That remained the case while he's making all of the changes to this room, but somehow after everything was fully set up, he tried plugging the amp straight into the wall, and now there isn't any hum anymore. So no reason to eliminate the Isotech from the setup, but a bit mysterious as to where the hum was coming from in the first place. It's definitely the speaker stand, scary. It's the two poles. It separates the electrons.
There's a induction going on between the two poles now.
The two poles.
Why not?
Yeah, it creates a EM field underneath to stop the hum.
Realistically, speaker wires were definitely getting moved around at this point. I think something was draped over something or near something in the past, and now
I would guess anymore. That's what it'd be like.
That would be the most
power cable, a power cord lying on top of a coil of speaker wire would be my guess.
Or too close to an amplifier or something.
Could be too. Yeah.
Or a light.
Sasi enjoyed Joe's guest hosting appearance last week and was able to communicate with us, lamenting the discontinuation of the HSU horn-loaded in-wall speakers. Sasi has spent a lot of time researching in-wall speaker options himself and finding that perfect combination of price and performance is indeed a challenge.
Yeah.
He had a few thoughts he wanted to share. The biggest tip he wanted to offer, call RSL to order their speakers. Don't just order them online via their website. He fully agrees with Rob that, in the absence of HSU's in-walls, RSLs are probably the best alternative right now. And if you call RSL on the phone and to order several of them, they have always offered him a discount that does not appear automatically in the website's shopping cart. So that can be well worth it. And if you are also getting a subwoofer from them as part of a surround sound package, even though speedwoofers are almost always on back order on the website, they typically hold some in reserve for customers who are ordering an entire surround sound package from them. So bottom line, always give them a call.
I like that. Costs you nothing.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are not like Gen Z, but maybe some of them are. Gen Z, my kids are Gen Z. Let me tell you, I know it's hard to talk to people. Full stop. I understand that. My kids suffer with this. And it's just part of this this is their cross to bear. We all have our own crosses to bear from our different generations. That we all have our things that our generation as a whole has a hard time with. Like Gen X, emotions. So, there's a lot of stuff going on for everybody. This is yours, okay?
Yeah.
Please call. We're having a problem with all three of our cars. We had three cars. We had to get rid of one, and we replaced it with the CRV that I was just talking about. But we have another one that's having an issue, and we were told by our mechanic that there might be a recall. Okay. That could potentially solve our problem. So we went on, my son, who was Gen Z, went online, looked it up on the online thing and said, nope, there's no recall on it. And my wife was like, okay, thank you for doing that. And today she called them and said, hey, this is the problem we're having. And the person on the phone said, oh, there is a recall on that. Call your local dealer and coordinate getting it taken in. Will they fix the problem? I have no clue. I have no clue what's going to happen. But I'll tell you what was going to happen if we hadn't called. Nothing. Okay, so do not always call if you can. If there is a number, if there is a customer service, the worst thing you do is you waste a few minutes of your time on hold. and have to deal with the discomfort of speaking to another human being live over the phone, which my kids cannot do.
That's right.
I have one son who can kind of do it, but he can't do it with us. So whatever. So anyways, we're still with Sasi here. He wanted to mention that Kef and Revel offer some of the best sounding in-walls he has personally heard, but they definitely cost more. So he understands why we didn't bring them up. Again, sometimes dealers and retailers have discounts available if you're buying several of them, so it can be worth inquiring. Kef in particular is often available on accessories for less too. For those of you that I don't know about the in-walls.
Not as many, but
true. But so it's always worth checking accessories for less. The monolith THX in-walls also go on sale frequently, but they are physically larger than most other in-wall speakers, and they aren't the easiest to drive. And then, of course, we all know all about RBH, since we mention them all the time. Similar to Kef and Revel, they cost more than RSL or what the HSU in-walls used to cost, but he did notice that the new Impression series on-wall speakers are only 4 inches deep, so they require a bit of a different installation procedure since they don't have in-wall hardware included, but since they're fully sealed, there's no reason they couldn't be embedded inside a wall, cut out in a standard wall, right? So they could be an option. They could, yes.
They could.
They aren't really... You have to assume that a speaker that is designed to be put on the wall, the front baffle is not meant to be a continuous wall. So I don't think that sonically it would make a huge difference, but it would be worth inquiring from them if it would be
massive.
If you should do something separate, or if they anticipate there being any problems. I think that the RBH in-walls are a perfect
on-walls
are a perfect opportunity for you to build a little column or it's just install them as intended, but gussing them up a little bit, if you will.
I think that's a perfectly decent option. Still costs more than what the HSUs used to cost, as in-walls.
This is all true. Andrew from AV Gadget. So the front panel buttons combinations we mentioned last week to access his Onkyo receiver's hidden menus did not work, but we did end up finding its hidden menus. Okay, it took a bit of searching, but for Andrew's Onkyo TX NR7100 model, you have to hold down the tone button on the front panel and then press the return button. That actually brought up a whole on-screen hidden menu with all the options listed so you can scroll through them. Makes doing an unintended factory reset a bit easier to avoid. And indeed, setting the HDMI bandwidth to enhanced on the deep and the deep color to on seemed to get his Xbox working with his LG OLED remaining in PC mode, so as desired, so success. There you go.
There it is. You gotta love the hidden menus that are mentioned nowhere in the user manual, nowhere in the user menus. You gotta hold down some button on the front panel, not on the remote. Press another button while you're holding down that other button, finding out exactly what that combination is. Not exactly easy to find, but I will say, we did find it eventually.
We were up in Knoxville at my friend's house. He had a LG, I think it's an OLED. It might have been I think this was an OLED. And we were watching different stuff. I'm just eventually after a couple of days, because I try really hard not to mess with other people's setups. I just went, give me that damn remote, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Give me that remote. And I just went through the picture settings, and I mean, it took 5 minutes or something, and I just did it all from memory from stuff I had done on my own thing, and kind of looked through the power saving menus and then I looked up ratings recommendations for a similar TV, but not the exact same one because it didn't have the exact same one on there, and kind of ascertain what I should put it there, and then said, all right, that's it. I got to fix it a little bit. It's just too dark. It was just too dark.
Yeah, right.
So I left, and I got a text from him later. He goes, listen, I didn't want to admit it, but my TV has never looked better.
Good.
That's good. That's right.
So get into our questions here. Some of them are pretty lengthy and multi-part. So any of the shorter ones, if you notice the timestamps are super short, we aren't going to stretch anything out this week because we got plenty others to get to. So
famous last words.
Yep.
Jay. In Jay's living room setup, he's put a TV on a TV stand and pulled it as far forward as possible away from the front wall behind it to make the field of view as large as he can manage. That has resulted in there being about 2 feet from the back of the TV to the actual front wall. The living room is no way dedicated to being a home theater space, so putting up acoustic panels everywhere is out of the question. He's managed to find a good spot for some panels on the back wall directly behind the couch, and he's hoping He might be able to mount a couple of panels on the side walls as well, but that isn't certain yet. But since he has this 2-foot space behind the TV, he figured he'd be able to hide a pretty big panel, at least visually, on the front wall. And it could be pretty darn thick. So it's a 2-foot space directly behind the TV. Isn't really being used for anything at all. But is it even worth the time, effort, and cost? The solid TV screen is going to be directly in front of it. So is that just blocking an absorption panel behind it completely and rendering it useless? Okay. This is a very easy thing to think, and you are correct, and you are wrong. Okay, so you are correct in that any treble that is coming from your speakers
frequencies,
will be blocked by the TV and reflect off the TV before they ever get there. But those bass waves are going to wrap right around that bad boy. And any treble that's bouncing around the room off the other walls that gets around the TV will also be absorbed.
Just by angles of reflection.
So just think of it as like, in a case like yours, any absorption is better than no absorption. It's not like anything would be useless. There will always be a use for it. So if you can put a 4-inch thick panel or panels.
And it sure sounds like you can do more than 4 inches back there.
4 inches gapped off the wall by a couple of inches, maybe 6 inches gapped off the wall by a couple of inches, and then
heck, 1.5 feet, man.
Yeah, really. Just freestanding panels, wall to ceiling, the entire back wall. Or behind this thing, framing it in black, maybe even. You know what I mean? Giving it sort of like I'm not going to put fabric back there. I'm not going to paint my wall, but I'm going to put like 7-8 panels behind it, so that it gives it this sort of almost that black wall, sort of that shadow box sort of feel. Do it. Yes, good. Any direct sound firing directly at your TV, of which there is remarkably little, will bounce off the TV and then bounce off the room. But then the high frequency, sorry. But it'll then get to that panel, and plus you'll be absorbing a lot of bass.
This is absolutely worth doing. We always say, if you're going to start with acoustic treatment, start with bass traps. Bass traps.
That's what this is.
If you can cover about 10% of your room's total surface area, right? So all 4 walls, ceiling, and floor, total up what that surface area is. If about 10% of that is covered in bass traps, you're doing really, really well. You're not going to get there, but you can add a significant amount of bass trapping, and you will want to make this panel as thick as you reasonably can. As thick as you can manage back there, do it, put it behind the TV, and that is well worth your while to do it. I would be surprised if there is zero noticeable difference from doing that. There definitely should be, because there's not much else in this room to help you with bass trapping, and this will be a help. Do it.
Yes. Mark has carefully calibrated his sound system, and he cares about his speakers and doesn't want them to get damaged. His Onkyo receiver displays a volume readout in absolute rather than relative numbers, and he had to look it up. But 82.5 on his model is equivalent to 0 dB reference level, and he'll get pretty close to that volume setting when he's watching movies sometimes. His daughters use the system to watch YouTube videos, and some of their favorite videos are gamers playing through horror games with wildly loud sound effects and the streamers screaming their heads off into their microphone, almost certainly clipping their microphones or their recording thing.
That's what he's going to be talking about.
But the sound effects and the people screaming produces excessive clipping and distortion noises. So he's told his daughters he doesn't want them to ever turn the volume past 50 when they're watching those YouTube videos, but they complain it's too quiet, and they point out that he turns this movie up to the 80s, so how is that fair? He says he started trying to explain mastering levels and dynamic range and dynamic compression to them, but clearly lost them less than halfway through. My dude,
I love that.
I wish I had 1/10 of your optimism. I'm going to be honest with you. That was good. That was good. That was nice. It was like when somebody asked you a question and you realize it was rhetorical halfway through your answer. You're like, oh God. But I've already down this path. I'm going to finish. I can't not finish. So, all right. So the thing, even with the volume dial limited to a max of 50, those YouTube videos still sound like nails on a chalkboard, much quieter in terms of dB of SPL, of course, but still sound like his speakers are clipping and distorting because they are recreating distortion and clipping.
Yes. Yeah.
So those are awful sounds just baked into the YouTube videos themselves, and his daughters are actually correct. It would be told, and his daughters are actually correct. It would be totally safe for his speakers to play those videos as loud as his movies? So yes, they are baked in there.
The microphone of the person screaming into the microphone is clipped.
Or the preamp. I mean, sure. Something down the chain in the recording process.
That's right.
They could have actually, compressed it to the point of clipping as well. So
possibly, but I mean, very often, like
it's just the
that's there,
clipping.
and a lot of those like loud sound effects in the horror games have intentional clipping in the signal because they know that makes it sound louder and screechier.
I've heard bass in like rap songs that it is clipped. Part of the bass. It is clipped. It drives me nuts.
So like quite literally, no matter what volume level you play it back at, you're going to hear clipping and distortion because it's in the signal to begin with. So no matter what volume you'll play it back, there's going to be that distortion and clipping there.
So he figures distortion is distortion, whether it's a clean signal played loud enough to make the speakers themselves distort, or it's distortion baked into the signal itself, even though the actual SPL might not be any higher than a loud movie. So is that actually correct? Is he just being paranoid? Is there a message that the AVRant guys can explain to his daughters to make sure they aren't going to do any damage to his speakers? So I don't think that it's playing the sounds at a softer distorting your speakers or pushing your speakers so hard as to distort or clip them or your amplifier will risk damaging your speakers.
Yes.
Recreating distortion sounds with speakers at a volume level that is not creating a distortion within your speakers or clipping within your speakers or your amplifier is not dangerous.
That's right. Yeah, there's a big difference between I have pushed the volume level of any signal, doesn't matter what the signal is, could just be a pure sine wave tone, nothing else.
Right.
Pushing that volume level up to the point that your speakers have reached and exceeded their excursion limit, so they went as physically far out and back in as they possibly can, and the signal would have liked them to go physically further, but they can't. That's full-on speaker physical clipping, or just getting to the point where they are physically working themselves so hard that they are distorting, or playing a driver playing frequencies outside of its frequency band, whatever that is. There is a very large difference between that, where the speaker is reaching its physical limits due to the signal, versus recreating clipping and distortion that is present in the recorded signal, where it was the microphone that clipped, or intentional distortion in the created signal. That is a considerably different thing. So, in a way, your daughters are closer to being right than you were. Now, there is certainly the thing where most YouTube videos are at a much higher signal level than standardized movies, right? So if you just left the volume dial all alone and you played a movie that had been ripped to YouTube and played at the levels that YouTube videos often are, that'll be 20 or 30 decibels louder than the properly mastered movie.
I almost never have YouTube at higher than minus 30 on my dial.
Right.
It is so freaking loud.
Yeah, so for that reason, you telling your daughters that there's a limit that you don't want them to go past, you're not wrong about that. Just because something like, if reference volume is 82.5 on your volume dial, telling them, don't go past like 65, because there are a lot of YouTube videos where the volume level in the signal is a good 20 decibels louder than a properly mastered movie. You're right there, but your daughters are closer to being right than you were about the signal itself is not inherently dangerous. Them playing a sound where the microphone of the person screaming into the microphone clipped, or like Tom says, their microphone preamp clipped, or just the recording software clipped, right? Reproducing that at what is a safe playback volume level for your speakers, but what it's playing back is distortion and clipping that's been recorded. That's okay. It's not going to damage your speakers to do that.
What I might suggest for you is either Dolby or Odyssey volume, the dynamic range compression
in your AV receiver.
Yeah. I would consider turning that on when they are watching these videos,
and it doesn't have to be all the way up to its highest setting. The low setting is enough to provide some protection,
just to make sure that any super loud sounds will be brought down in volume, because it's really not. The volume of the sound does help, but it's really the tone and the how suddenly the sound comes in that is the scary part. So, yes, a really loud sound can make you jump, but even not a very loud sound can make you jump if you weren't expecting it to happen. So I think that won't take the enjoyment away from the videos all that much.
Yeah.
But look for a dynamic range compression system within your receiver, which should, Odyssey has one, so you have a Marantz, right? He has a Marantz. Did he say? Yeah.
I forget what we were dealing. Onkyo. It's an Onkyo.
Onkyo.
There's going to be a dynamic.
There's going to be something in there.
Yeah.
So go find it, turn it on, and leave it on when they're there, and you can turn it off yourself, and then you just have to remember to turn it back on. Don't rely on them to turn it on for you.
Oh, definitely not, yeah.
You'll have to do it yourself.
But yeah, I would agree. I probably wouldn't let them turn it all the way up to 82.5 because YouTube videos are louder than movies, but I think 50 is probably a bit more conservative than needed. I mean, if they're watching the videos and they're like, it's honestly just too quiet. Yeah. Like your daughters have a point there. They're not wrong in that case. But I think probably something around 65 or so would be safe and probably a good compromise between the two of you.
Yeah. Michael has a 77-inch LG CX OLED from 2020 and the Marantz SR8012 receiver. The TV can accept 4K 120 signals with VRR. The receiver tops at 4K 60 since all of his HDMI ports are HDMI 2.0 and not 2.1. Yeah. So he plugged his PS5, and in his email, he wrote Xbox One directly into the TV and then uses eARC. He says both consoles can output 4K 120 this way, so he must have meant an Xbox Series X or S, we're thinking. Rob's thinking. I wasn't
regardless, PS5 was definitely clear, so that one can do 4K 20 regardless.
Yeah. So VR works very well this way, but he knows that with this connection path, he's never able to get any DTS audio formats.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's because the
TV's fault in this case. Yeah.
Dolby Audio works just fine, but no DTS of any kind. Did he miss a setting or do the setup wrong somehow? If not, is there a device that will let him split the audio from the video so he can send those separately to the receiver and TV respectively? That's just the LG. For a while, they did not do DTS
there was
at all.
A handful of model years in there where they just didn't support DTS, and there's still some TVs from other brands that don't support DTS. So,
and that's just a cost-cutting measure. I mean, or maybe there's not a DTS
chips
or
they
something.
Chose.
Yeah. So you'll need for those to have something that splits off the audio. Yeah. And you can just send it directly. And then once you do that for that device, you might as well just leave it that way for everything. There's no reason to use audio return channel at that point. You just,
right.
You just use your splitter.
I did want to mention, like, there are a few games here and there that do use DTS audio, so maybe there's, like, a specific games that he likes that's DTS audio is, like, that's really bugging him. But very, very few. There's not very many games that use DTS audio. There's no streaming services that use DTS audio other than Disney Plus.
That he's worried about mostly, right?
Yeah, Disney Plus can do DTS now on those IMAX enhanced movies, but I don't think they've brought that support to the consoles as playback devices yet. I'm pretty sure it's only IMAX enhanced like televisions that let you do the DTS audio out of those yet. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that it hasn't come to the consoles yet. So yeah, I'm thinking this is like disc playback. That would be predominantly where you would get it, Blu-rays. And I'm like, so do you need both of your consoles to be able to play Blu-rays? Because I'm also thinking if he was right originally in his email and it's an Xbox One and a PS5, I'm like, well, if you're willing to use your Xbox One as your Blu-ray player instead of your PS5, there's not really any reason the PS5 needs to pass DTS through because it's not going to be coming from the streaming services through the PS5 and maybe one or two games. So that, like I say, that could be the very reason. But there's a scenario in here where you don't have to do anything besides connect the PS5 directly to the LG because if the other console you have is an Xbox One and not an Xbox Series console, the Xbox One isn't doing 4K 120 anyway, so the only console you would need to connect directly to the LG would be the PS5, and then you can just connect the Xbox to your Marantz and use that as your disc player, and you'll have the DTS audio that way. So that's the scenario where you don't have to do any purchasing. But let's put all that aside, answer the question as wrote. Are there devices that can do it? So there are the HD Fury devices that I 100% trust to be able to do this. The least expensive, unfortunately, though, because we're talking about HDMI 2.1 and 4K 120 and VRR pass-through, would be the 8K Arcana 2. And that sells for $350. So that is not exactly an inexpensive price, but that does let you fully separate the audio and video, send the audio just to the receiver, send the video just to the TV, and I trust it completely to work. If you want switching, because the Arcana is just a one HDMI input, so if you want to plug both of your consoles in at all times, you would want to get the switching device that can do this from HD Fury, which is the 8K Vroom, the VRR, the VRR standing for variable refresh rate in there. But that is $550 to give you 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs and then 4 HDMI outputs, but there's actually only 2 video outputs, and then there is a dedicated audio-only output, exactly what you need in this scenario, and there is a dedicated ARC/eARC output as well, in case you're connecting it to like a Sonos soundbar that has nothing but HDMI-ARC as its available connection. So that would solve your problem, and I would trust it to, but $550 is kind of ridiculous. You could buy a whole new AV receiver or pretty close to it for that price. So there is a less expensive alternative from the company Orei, O-R-E-I. They have their BK927 device that sells for $126. This is a single HDMI 2.1, 4K 120 support, 8K 60 support, single HDMI input, 2 outputs, one of them audio only. Absolutely does exactly what you're asking for, except that it is a single HDMI input. So if you do have a PS5 and an Xbox Series X, to switch between them, you're like physically unplugging the HDMI cable between those consoles and swapping that, because this is not an HDMI switcher. This is a single HDMI input. So there are options to do this for as little as $126. But yeah, that would be the way to get around this. All right, Tom is still away checking on whatever is making noise outside of his theater room, so I will move on to Dan. Dan, first up for Dan, because he's got a couple of things we're going to talk about. Dan and his wife own a house with a fairly large, unfinished basement. They have some pretty grand designs in mind for fully finishing it, and including a dedicated home theater space down there when they do. The existing exposed studs in the basement are larger 2x6 studs instead of the standard 2x4 studs, and in their imagination, they're not too worried about soundproofing, so he wants to float an idea or two and get our reactions. So yeah, Tom's back. You want to start in on that question?
Sorry about that. I wanted to check to see what was going on. I think I was supposed to see the construction next door that was making all that noise. Also, got some more coffee.
No intruders.
So, well, yeah, I made it back alive.
Yeah.
What if they don't put up any drywall inside the future basement theater? What if he fills all the 2x6 base studs with insulation and then uses a fabric track system such as fabric wall to cover everything, including the speaker and wall speakers? One question in particular about fabric wall is that they offer semi-rigid fiberglass panels of their own that are meant to slot in between the tracks that hold the fabric. Mm-hmm. They offer various track thicknesses, so you can have different thicknesses of their semi-rigid fiberglass panels, and all that could cover an existing wall to provide acoustic absorption and the fabric covering. But if he's going to leave his wall studs exposed and already have regular insulation filling those exposed bays, would there be any need for fabric wall semi-rigid panels? Or if he did put their semi-rigid panels in between the fabric tracks, would they render all of the insulation in the wall bays behind them pointless? He's just trying to figure out if they should keep this idea in mind and research it further, or reject it immediately and better spend their attention elsewhere. All right, so we've talked about this like in ceilings before. We've seen people do this in ceilings where they've got a garage or that they're converting, or a basement that they're converting, and the bays are open. We're like, just fill the whole thing up with insulation and put fabric over the top of it, and now you call it a day. So the obvious problems here, and you said you're not worried about soundproofing. Well, you're really not going to be worried about soundproofing because you've now eliminated a full barrier, which you're like, well, the bass is going to go through the structure of the house. Yeah, there's now less mass between your speakers and the floors above or around you.
Hugely in favor of the no drywall at all anywhere inside the theater. It wouldn't be my first inclination.
But I can understand where you're coming from.
I certainly can.
And we've always talked about, you can get, want to do 30%. And if you did all your walls, with just straight insulation and fabric over the top of it, you would definitely hit that 30% mark, and it would definitely be,
you'd be beyond it, yeah.
But now at this point, you've got a room that's got fabric walls instead of regular walls, and you are literally going to have to put walls up before you sell your house. I'm never going to sell my house. All right. I'm probably never going to sell my house either. But at the same time, I'm probably going to sell my house someday.
There's another consideration too, which is that when you do finish a basement, there are codes, there are building codes. Yes. And it's not, so obviously you can have an unfinished basement. An unfinished basement can still have electrical outlets, things like that. But once you put up walls and you put a covering over those walls, even if it's a fire-rated fabric, now any electrical that's in those fire-rated fabric-covered walls technically has to be inside conduit, has to be inside fire-rated conduit. You can't just use regular Romex at that point anymore, if you're not going to have drywall covering that. You put a covering over it so somebody can't see it. You can't just walk into the room and see the wiring like you can when it's just a completely unfinished basement. So now you have to have everything properly fire-rated to meet code. There's possibly other considerations in there. There can be things with ducting that are that way too when it comes to fire code and building code and that. So this isn't necessarily quite as simple as you're thinking. Plus, I don't love the idea on a sound level of not having any drywall whatsoever on the inside of this theater. So look, I do like the idea of fabric covered walls inside of a theater. Love that idea. If you're going to have in-wall speakers, wonderful way to do it. If you want to visually hide all of your acoustic treatments, fabulous way to do it. I like systems like the fabric wall track system and that. I probably under no circumstances would buy their brand of semi-rigid insulation. It's always more expensive than it needs to be, and it doesn't do anything particularly fancy that the bulk insulation that you can buy from anywhere else would also perform the exact same task. So on that front, I probably wouldn't do that. If you do have semi-rigid fiberglass insulation that is on top of other insulation, that's fine. You have not rendered the insulation that is behind the semi-rigid completely useless. It's not a solid barrier that doesn't allow sound waves to get through. It will get through that semi-rigid insulation. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And so that all of those questions, I think we've answered there. But I would drywall inside of this new theater that you're building. And then if you want to, instead of painting, finishing the walls that way, have a fabric-covered wall system, but I would have insulation that you have put on top of the drywall that you've drywalled, and I would put something like a fabric wall track system on top of that and have your in-wall speakers all mounted in there. That's my personal opinion on that. It avoids all the fire safety code problems. You're still going to want fire-rated fabric. That's still necessary. But It avoids all of the electrical, the plenum, all that type of stuff. And I just want that room to have, for sound purposes, drywall inside it too.
Yeah, it's one thing to say that you don't really care about soundproofing, and it's another thing that every time you watch TV, everybody gets to hear the TV in the entire
anybody
house.
Is outside of the theater in this house, and you can absolutely hear what they're saying. You can hear them walking. Yeah.
So his house is already pre-wired for whole house audio in 8 different rooms, but he hasn't cut any holes in the ceiling yet to install in-ceiling speakers at all of the pre-wired locations. So a while back, he bought a pair of monoprice 8-inch Alpha Series speakers when they were on sale, but they are still sealed in their boxes and never opened. He can't really think of any way to audition them fairly without fully installing them. But one issue is that, compared to a lot of other 8-inch in-ceiling speakers, the monoprice Alphas require a slightly larger cutout. So if he tries them and doesn't like them, it'll be a bigger hassle when he'll have to patch the drywall to fit most of the other speakers. Will he like them? Should he try to return them and get some Sonos Mag 8 speakers from Best Buy instead? You've got the speakers. There's no world in which I'm going to tell you.
And he's got one pair of them and 8 different rooms where they could go.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
There's got to be one of those rooms has to be one where you're like, I'm not going to use the in-house system in here as often as some of the other rooms. Try them out in there. I mean, personally, I doubt you'll be disappointed by the 8-inch monoprice Alpha speakers. They're nice speakers. I'm not sure. I mean, if you really, really picky or just have a particular sound signature in mind and nothing else will do, I suppose. But I mean, if you just want pretty darn nice, pleasant sounding, play it more or less like it is speakers. I like those alpha speakers. So I would be a little surprised if you utterly hate them, but given they got 8 different places where they can go, I wouldn't return them. No way. And we're also going to be talking a little bit later on, the Mag 8s and the Mag 6s that I've liked so much, they're discontinued now. So that's not really going to be a solution going forward.
Yeah. So one of the things you can do, though, and this is not optimal, but I've got an article about it, I think. You can basically just get a scrap piece of drywall.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, you could really just plywood. It doesn't really matter because you're not...
Yeah, a flat, hard surface.
Flat, hard surface. Install them into that and then set them up away from you some distance. And it can just be one. And play it. And just see what it sounds like.
It won't be exactly the way it sounds.
But... Exactly. It won't give you the exact experience that you would get from having them plugged in, into the ceiling and everything else. But again, this is whole house audio. Are you looking for sonic bliss?
And
how
if those
critical are you
speakers
going to
were
be?
So awful that you would be truly disappointed with them, you will glean that much from this scrap piece test. That's the point of doing it.
Yeah. He wants a wireless whole house audio system to power the speakers, and he liked AirPlay 2 functionality. So he's leaning towards using Weem amps after balking at the price of Sonos amps. Any reason to avoid Weem amps for this application or go with something else instead? There's a lot of whole house audio solutions that are out there that allow you to use apps or specific Bluetooth or whatever, specific wireless technologies to do it. And I think that if the Weem does it, then it's fine.
Yeah, so because there's the scenario where he's not literally doing all 8 rooms at once, right? He's like doing 2 rooms now, and then he adds another room or 2 later and kind of does this piecemeal. If that's the scenario you're in, like I like the Wim amps. I certainly like them a lot more for their price point than the Sonos amps. It'll do all the things that you talked about wanting to do, and I like that solution. There's no reason I'm going to tell you to completely avoid them. If that solution works for you, definitely go for it. The only reason I might suggest doing something else instead is if you are doing all 8 rooms simultaneously, you could probably do that a bit less expensively with a distribution amp. Monoprice and Dayton have some excellent distribution amps at very reasonable prices. You do that, and then if you are like, okay, I need like 4 separate sources, right? That will so I can play 4 different things simultaneously. Maybe I only need 2 or 3 separate sources if I'm being honest, and I'm mostly going to be wanting to share, 1 or 2 or 3 sources between several rooms at a time. Then, you can plug into those distribution amps something like just the regular Wim or the Wim Mini, which is very affordable.
It's
getting something like I know. It certainly looks like it, but they want us to say Wim.
Well,
but yeah,
they should have spelled it that way then.
You can get one of the Wim devices that just has a line level output, no amplifiers built in. Like I say, the Wim Mini is very affordable, and that could potentially do what you want to do for a lower price in total, right? If you're doing all 8 rooms at once. So that might be the alternative, Dayton or a monoprice distribution amplifier. But other than that, I have no problem with you doing all of this via Wim amps.
Yeah, there's also the distribution amps. A lot of times you can plug in multiple sources, so you could get like a number of different Chromecasts or whatever things that you like to use, and then send them to the different places within your house. Right. I mean, a lot of times, for me, like 8 zones of audio. I cannot think of a situation where I want all 8 zones going simultaneously.
Yeah, like a separate thing in all 8 zones. That's a little unusual.
Yeah, but even with all 8 zones, okay. Even if the opposite side of having all 8 zones doing the same thing at the same time, I'm like, there's, I don't necessarily want to be in the bathroom hearing the same thing I'm hearing when I'm, like if I'm playing something in the bathroom, I probably want that to be its own zone and everything else to be a separate one. So you how many zones do you really need? Is the question. As
far as separate sources go.
Yes. Infinite Gary. Gary saw an interview on Audio Advice's YouTube channel with a rep from Macintosh, and at one point fairly early on, they were talking about Macintosh's 350 watt vacuum tube monoblock 3500 amp, with the rep claiming that we can't really give you a good explanation for why, but at very modest volumes, the sound opens up.
Uh-huh. As compared to
as
other
does your
amplifiers.
wallet, in case you're wondering.
Sure does. Definitely.
Even Gary was skeptical and didn't think that what was being said seemed all that credible. But is there any actual science to back up claims like this? Can a higher wattage amplifier somehow provide benefits at low volume levels that would be audible compared to other amplifiers? I mean, this is a tube amplifier. Let's start with that.
Yeah, vacuum tube amplifier.
They are not
there.
linear. They are not linear necessarily at different volumes.
Well, they can be linear. They can be.
They can be. And I would expect that Macintosh would try to make them linear, but at the same time...
I don't know about
that. At the same time, they also want to sound like a Macintosh amp, whatever that means. So, I don't think that naturally... I mean, it's not... This guy's talking about magic, basically. If he has a scientist or a designer or an engineer anywhere in the Macintosh company...
Mm-hmm.
They could, and this was actually happening.
They could explain.
They could explain it, and if they can't explain it, then the difference is happening between your ears and not outside of your ears.
Yeah. So objectively speaking, what could one amplifier versus another? And the scenario they were talking about, very modest playback levels. So we are not requiring the 350 watts. We're not requiring 100 watts. We're nowhere near one of these amplifiers. Just has more headroom available, and we're getting into that dynamic range. That's the scenario they were talking about. They were saying very modest playback volumes. So whatever two amps are being compared, they're well within their parameters for how much they can deliver. What could objectively, genuinely be different between the two amplifiers that you might be able to hear at these very modest playback levels? So there could be a measurable difference in the noise floor between the two amplifiers.
At low volumes, though, that seems very unlikely, but go on.
Honestly, at most playback levels, you're as soon as there's actually content playing, whatever the noise floor will be, unless it's egregious, you are never going to really actually notice. But if you're talking about, super quiet passages, some weird, eccentric, jazz things where tiny little sounds are plinking out and then it goes to dead silence, could I envision a scenario where there's a difference in audible noise floor between two amplifiers? Sure, that could exist. Could one amplifier be non-linear and the other amplifier is linear? That can happen. You could design an amplifier that way if you want to. That just means you have a non-adjustable equalizer built into one of those amplifiers. That could be the case. That's not completely out of the question. You do have the whole vacuum tube thing. It's a little unlikely that at these low volume levels that's honestly making an inherent difference, as long as there isn't something completely wrong with the structure of that. But yeah, about the only thing that could be going on, and this is kind of like noise floor, but not necessarily. You could have one amplifier that has like full-on audible distortion or noise floor at all times, such as how a turntable has a constantly audible noise floor as compared to a CD or a digital audio recording, unless that has been put in there intentionally. And there are many people who will swear up and down that anything played through a turntable has better warmth, better reality to it, and it turns out they just like that turntable hiss. It just makes them comfortable and makes everything feel warm and fuzzy, and you can make an amplifier make that noise. So maybe that's what it is, because if the sound opens up, it sounds so much more lush, even at low playback levels. Yeah, maybe it just produces a whole bunch of noise, a soft hiss like a turntable does. Maybe that's what they did, I don't know for sure. But for any properly functioning amplifiers that don't have egregiously loud noise floors or horrible distortion or unintentional or intentional non-linearity in the way that they play back the signal, nobody has ever been able, in a blind listening comparison, been able to tell those amplifiers apart, and that would be the case here. So it's probably just in their heads saying, I know I'm playing a Macintosh 3500 monoblock amplifier, and therefore I believe 100% that I'm hearing sounds that there's no actual objective difference.
It's all imagined. Brandon. At the moment, Brandon's home theater setup is in an area that is open to the rest of the house. He's done pretty well for himself, managing to set up a 7.2.4 Atmos configuration along with the Epson 3800 projector. He's using a Denon X3800H receiver because he likes the number 3800.
Maybe. It's also a really good choice for a wonderful receiver.
If he could find some 3800 speakers, you'd have those too.
Sure.
With the Send Acoustics CBM 170 SE speakers up front, the HTM 200 SE speakers that surround backs, and 4 Sonos Mag 8 and ceiling speakers with back cants. If you take those two, add them up, and then multiply it by the number of Mag 8s, it equals 3,800.
Gotta be.
No, actually, it equals 1,800 because he's subs or a pair of SVS SB 1000 Pros. You had the 2000s on there, and bam, 3,800, baby.
I don't think that's actually true, but we like to believe so.
It's a 3,800. I bet you could math that thing out somehow.
Oh, there's got to be a way.
There's hey, you those numerology people come up with some
Rachel
crazy
Riley or
stuff. They
that.
can math anything.
8 out of 10 cats does Countdown Girl. Get her in here. She'll make it work.
And to try to get some tactile bass in this open room setup, he's played around with a couple of Aura Pro bass shakers. They don't have any numbers, unfortunately. But even with this dedicated tactile transducer output offered by his 3800H, he's a bit unsure whether he actually likes them or not. You don't, because they suck. Tactile transducers in general is what I'm saying, not these ones in particular. There is an area in this basement that could potentially be closed in to give him a dedicated home theater space that he could freely design as he chooses. He can't really crank up his system the way he would like right now unless no one else is at home. And with a dedicated room in the basement, he could black it out and finally experience full bass pressurization. So that's enticing. With the SB 1000 Pros, you probably want something smaller than an open concept room. So yes.
Yep. I can also see why those subs were chosen right now, because they're nice and compact and they work in a living room setup. I get it.
It's funny that people take their small rooms and put massive subs in them because they're dedicated rooms. They take their big rooms and put tiny subs in there because they're not dedicated rooms where they really need the big subs, but whatever. The thing is, it would end up being 21 by 8.5, but only 9.5 feet wide. Realistically, he's pretty sure it'll just be him in the theater by himself most of the time, but he does want at least 3 seats available. And with such a narrow room width, that has him a bit concerned. He was envisioning just a 3-seater couch and then a 16 by 9 acoustically transparent screen up front, pretty much taking up the entire width of the room with the screen 120 to 130 inches, depending on the frame around the screen. Man, you're going to be on that.
I mean, a 130-inch diagonal 16 by 9 screen would literally be 9.5 feet wide, so there would be zero frame.
Zero frame, it's put it right there on the wall. So that's what he's envisioning. Hold on,
that's what he's got in mind there. He wants the acoustically transparent screen. I like that. You got the room length, 21 feet long. You can do that. You can do the false wall.
Yeah. So what would be our advice to him when it comes to surround speak? We're going directly to surround speakers?
Well, yes, it makes sense. Yeah, you'll see.
He only has one row of seats. If he only has one row of seats in the form of a 3-seater couch, he doesn't really have to worry about walkways on either side or people bumping into the surround speakers mounted on the side walls. But would they simply be too close for anyone sitting on either of the side couch? Should he just move the surround speakers farther back to avoid them being too distracting? Should he get dipole surrounds instead and have the couch positioned in a dipole null? Should he potentially move the surround speakers forward some distance in front of the couch? Don't do that.
Not that one. No.
And if he lands on moving the surround speakers farther back, will that create too big of a gap from the front left and right speakers to the surrounds? With adding front white speakers be the solution in this case? Jeez. So first of all, who cares? Because you said at the start of this thing, it's probably just going to be me most of the time.
Most of the time.
If it's going to be you most of the time, then the times that it's not you, let the other person sit in the good seat.
Okay.
Let's start with that. Second, yes, move them back a little bit. Okay, because I think that's just a better placement.
Back and up a little bit, too.
Yeah. So I don't think that you need to go the full extent. First of all, dipole speakers are becoming more and more rare, so why even bother doing that?
And that would leave you absolutely no room to get your head around on the side of the seats and the side wall. Yeah, that'd be a challenge.
I wouldn't worry about wides either. I think that this is...
the front wide fan around here, probably wouldn't do front wides in this setup.
This is pretty, it's pretty common that there's a big gap between your front left and right speakers and your surround speakers. That is not uncommon. And nobody's like, oh, I wish I had put some speakers in front of me instead. Most people don't say that. The people who do are being disingenuous anyways. So I would place them as we normally suggest around here. I wouldn't worry too much about them being too close to one of the side seats myself, since it's normally going to be one person in here, and the times it's not. Give them the good seat. That's what I do. That's what you should do. You should do that.
I would say 3 seats across in a 9.5 foot wide room is pretty squishy.
Yeah.
And even if you put that couch, all the way to one side and the walkway is only on the other side, it's still kind of squishy. Whereas a love seat fits very nicely in that width, and you've got the room length that maybe you have 2 rows of seats in the form of 2 love seats, one behind the other.
Yeah.
I know that's a little bit weird, but it's not completely out of the question in my mind. I'm sort of picturing that. Yeah, maybe you have 2 love seats.
I don't hate the idea of having a 3-seater couch slammed to one wall and the main seat being the far seat from the one that's on the arm. And that being the more main seat.
That could be a way to do it too.
Either way, I also envision having one main seat and then having a love seat couch, or a couch on the back wall, or a 3-seater behind it.
Yeah, I could also see like a 3 or even a 4-seater that's pretty close to the back wall, and then the main seats or a love seat, in the middle. And now you've got a decent walkway. Whoever's sitting in that love seat getting a very good experience. The couch is, going to be a compromised experience, but whoever's sitting back there probably doesn't care anyway. And they can lay out back there. They can lie right down. If it's like a 4-seater couch, you're going to have nice room there. So I'm kind of thinking that a 2-row solution makes a lot of sense in this room. But it would be a love seat for the front seats.
Yes. In his open room with a pair of SVS SB1000 Pro subs, he's never really had to deal with with problematic room modes because they don't activate any of them because they're too small. But if he's now enclosed in a 21 by 9.5 foot room, how much of a concern will they be? Will he need more subs? Why are we even worry about this yet? Get the room set up first, and then ask me, and then listen to the bass, and then worry about this. Is there a minimum thickness of absorption he could add at the front or the back of the room that will eliminate room mode? There is no elimination, my friend. Just properly place the subs, as we talk about all the time.
I mean,
on this.
To be fair, if you had 22.5 feet of absorption in a 21-foot room, doesn't really seem possible. But if you could, maybe the room is actually a little bit longer than you thought, and you can fit 22.5 feet of absorption in there, then that might do it.
Just
but then that leaves you
very thick panel.
leaves you very, very little room to do anything else. In fact, no room whatsoever. So realistically speaking, there's no amount of insulation that you can put at the front of the back.
You have 2 subs in there, or 1 sub in there for this matter, and insulation, and that's the whole room. Right. The bass in there is amazing.
There's no way to hear it.
Ceiling insulation.
It's a philosophical question at this point, but if a subwoofer were in this room, would it sound amazing? And the answer is yes. Just
it would sound. I don't know if it would sound amazing, but there would be no real room interactions going on. So yes, don't worry about this. Will you need more subs? The answer is probably not. If you can set this room, if it's dedicated and you can move the subs where they need to be, the chances of you needing more subs versus wanting more subs.
There can be an argument here for upgrading the SB1000 Pros.
Yes, there
definitely can be an argument made there.
And honestly, if you start making that argument, I'm going to say just buy 2 more and have 2 stacks, basically.
I don't know. I mean, I care more about the 20 hertz output.
Yeah,
I think the more viable thing might be to sell those, because there are people out there who will buy your SB1000 Pros.
They have big rooms they want to shove them into.
Yes, those are quite resellable subs. So yes, when we get to the point of this room is fully finished and exists, if the budget is there that a subwoofer upgrade is possible, I'm not going to say there's no justifying a subwoofer upgrade, but it would be a pair of subs. They'd just be larger subs than your SB1000 Pros.
Yes. So we asked, will he need new different subwoofers to finally get full pressurized bass? We kind of addressed that already.
At 20 hertz, you probably will. Yeah.
The new basement room would be 1,700 cubic feet in air volume-ish. We don't really know. Yeah. What does full pressurization really feel like anyways? I have an article on that. I will link it up about pressurization. Essentially, the short version is the volume sounds the same no matter where you are in the room. Yeah, I mean, all things being equal, the room interaction is taken out of the way. But full pressurization means that no matter where you go, the bass is the same. If you think about your speakers, the closer you get to them, the louder it gets. When you pressurize a room with bass, the room is the bass producing organ, if you will, and you sound like you're inside of the bass the entire time. That's the short version.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, if you used to like car audio bass, which is like, 135, 140 dB, home theater and commercial theaters, right? Go to an IMAX, which is louder than 115 dB. It doesn't feel like car audio bass, right? It's not 135, 140 dB bass. It's 115. But when you get that at 20 hertz, when you get fully pressurized, like 110 plus decibel, 20 hertz bass, it does like wobble the jelly in your eyes a little bit. That's the really fun thing that 20 hertz bass does. So that's the thing you've never had in your living room setup.
So since his experiments with the Aura Pro bass shakers has left him a little wishy-washy, should we think about building a floating riser for his seats to give the tactile transducers more opportunity to shake the seats? I wouldn't even, no. There's no. In fact, I would anticipate selling these things because once you get your subwoofers set up, and properly pressurize this room, you're going to go like, it's already shaking the couch. I don't understand why I would need these other things.
And for whatever money you would have put into building a riser and maybe upgrading the bass shakers or whatever, like put all that money towards, maybe you sell your pair of SB1000 Pros and upgrade them to larger stuff. Not way larger. We're talking like monolith 10 inchers would absolutely do this, right? The M10s that don't have to cost a crazy arm and a leg. Like that's the type of subs. But a ported sub like that would be where I would go.
So fully acoustically treating the room will be a top priority after all of that is done. Would we say that a speaker upgrade would make the most notable difference? What would we say is the next level of speakers above the Ascend Acoustics SE series speakers that he already has?
We are so far away from worrying about this. I mean, I'll answer the question as road, but you're so far away.
We will answer the question because you asked it. But the reality is, and we have both come to this realization that all the other influencers are a bunch of freaking liars. And we have experienced speakers of numerous levels of price and performance, and the room makes more difference than any of that the most part.
And the subwoofers.
The subwoofers too, yes. So fully treating the room will make your speakers sound a bajillion times better than they already do.
Yeah. And these are very appropriate speakers for the room that you're building.
They are. Could you upgrade? Yeah, you could get the SVS Ultra Evolutions, whatever they are. They are going to be very good speakers.
Are they really that much of an upgrade over the?
I mean, he wants something. I mean, what is he going to do? Start buying Revels and Focals and?
Well, that's what I mean. Like honestly, to get a really worthwhile like. You're never going to question in a blind experiment which one is which, and you're always going to choose the higher end ones over the SE series because the SE series are darn good speakers.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Really good tell it like it is speakers. I mean, you're talking. Yeah, I mean, you're getting to like Revel Performa BEs. Way more expensive. I'm going to put Ascend's own Sierra RAL series speakers as like you can stick with Ascend and go to their much more expensive Sierra RAL series speakers. I would put them up there. So it's going to be other speakers that are of that ilk, of that performance level. Yeah, something from Focal, sure. But as like, you got to go far. You got to spend multiple times the price of those SE series speakers before I'm going to say that's one that you will always be able to tell them apart and always prefer the more expensive ones. You got to go far.
Right. So, I mean, so that's what we kind of talk about. These incremental increases in speaker performance. People are out there going, oh my God, that made so much a difference. I don't think it did. What's going to make the difference is you're going to upgrade your room into an enclosed space that's fully treated. That's going to be huge. Yeah. Then you're going to decide whether or not you want more bass, which you are going to say yes to. Then you're going to upgrade your subwoofers or do something about your subwoofers. And then you're going to say, should I upgrade my speakers? And we're going to say, well, get some in to test. And at the end of it, you're going to tell us, well, I mean,
I'll happily tell you, bring in a pair of Ascend's own Sierra RAL speakers, like a bookshelf pair, and do that audition.
And you will hear the difference, or you won't, but you probably will be able to hear a difference. And you're probably at the end going to go, one of two things. I've got money to burn and I want to have something better, therefore I'll buy them. Or I would rather not spend the money on that and try to spend it on another hobby or a person that I love rather than a marginal upgrade in sonic performance.
The gap between your current SE speakers and what I will what I will say I'm confident telling anyone is a step up at multiple times of the price, but like the gap from those two things is so much smaller than whatever you had before versus the SE series speakers, right? Whatever you had before to the SE series speakers was a nice, very noticeable, wonderful gap in performance, and then the next step up is like a little bit better. Reliably better, but a little bit.
Yeah. I just can't understate or overstate how important treating your room and enclosing your room
it's going to sound like a speaker upgrade to you.
It's going to sound like a massive speaker upgrade to you, especially bass. Robert and his wife closed on their new house in Arizona back in April. As soon as all the essential rooms were furnished and set up, he set his sights on his new enclosed media room. Mm-hmm. He painted everything in neutral gray. He's got a row of 4 home theater recliners. He's got a solid steel brand TV stand. Never heard of it. I'm sure it's great. Equipment shelves and speaker stands. And following our advice, he got himself a new SVS PB2000 Pro to go along with the PB2000 he already owned. Mm-hmm. He kept his Emotiva XMC1 Pre-Pro and the XPA7 Gen 3 amplifier from his previous setup to run the 7.2 configuration. He decided to go with Martin Logan Motion XT series speakers all around with F200 towers and C100 center up front, a B100 surrounds, and B10 surround backs. I'm going to say this is an inferior system to the last one because it doesn't add up to 3,800.
That's the only criteria.
That's the only thing we care about.
It is now.
His 77-inch LG CX OLED, which is, I guess, another theme of this podcast, stayed in the living room. So we got brand new 83-inch LG G4 MLA multi-lens array OLED for the media room. All of that equipment has been brought into the media room, but things aren't finalized yet. Wire management has been done, although he does have some in-wall speaker wire locations run, so the overall orientation won't be changing. And precise final placement isn't locked down yet, but he's provided some early photos so we have a decent idea what he's working with, since he wants our help acoustically treating this room.
Yeah, so in other words, don't be too critical of where the surrounds are in relation to the seats right now. This isn't like fully set up, finalized. This is what he's using. He's like, I just brought everything in the room to make sure it works.
Looks like he's going... Well, is this a fisheye lens or something? Because
there is weird. For the front, yeah. The side views are much more. This is almost a square room, right? Almost a square-shaped room. So it is not a tremendous amount of room front to back, but that's okay because we're not using an enormous display. I am kind of looking at where the seats are right now. I'm like, how does the door open into this room? Because that door swings into this room, and it sure looks like it's hitting a seat when it does that.
Yeah, it's all very confusing.
But no, I mean, everything is not in its final places just yet. That's fine. But that's more or less the room we're dealing with.
So as we can see, there are windows directly behind his seats on the right wall. He's installed fabric Roman shades that do a good job of dimming the room during the day, but he's a bit concerned about acoustic panel placement options due to where the windows are located. Mm-hmm. Doesn't really have any interest in DIY, so where would we point him for buying fully finished, ready-to-mount panels, and what are recommendations to him for acoustically treating this whole room? So... It's a very clean looking room. It's very nice. It's basically gray. Yep. I think that everything he's done is pretty good in here.
I like the two subs at the
I do not get how this door opens, but I think the door looks wider than it is.
I also think he came into this room, moved the seats, and then took the picture. I think that's what happened here.
Could be. So he's there's a couple of thing. I imagine the seats might be slammed up against the window at the end of this, which is okay. That's what
I doubt it because he's got surround back speakers, so he's going to have at least enough of a gap there for them to be on their stands behind his seats.
I don't know what's going on. So, anyways, he's got 7.2. I don't necessarily think in this room you need 7. I think 5 would probably be okay, but we are where we are at this situation.
That's right.
GIC or Acoustimac were the two places we're going to send you to look for. And just whichever is cheaper, has the color you want, or
also
the features.
There's definitely be some attention paid to aesthetics in this room.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
GIC has more options because they've got the panels that have either the mathematically calculated diffusion scattering plates on top of them that add a look to them, or they have their impression series panels, which doesn't really do much acoustically, but just aesthetically, they have these nice wooden plates on top with patterns carved into them. So if it's more about looks, GIK has more choices that way. On the other hand, if what you want is plain but more fabric choices, Acoustimac actually has you covered there, because they've got their executive fabrics, they have their suede fabrics that I really like. So if you just want plain absorption panels but more fabric choices and a little bit lower prices, really like Acoustimac there. Or it could be a mix of both, right? Maybe you're like, I want a couple suede panels, I want a couple panels with some nice artistic scattering plates on them, or I want to put printed artwork on them. Both companies offer that. Acoustimax is less expensive, but it is printed. GIK's is sublimated dye, so it's actually a little bit more high quality process, but costs a bit more. So yeah, between those two companies, you will definitely find solutions here. But in terms of strategizing how we're going to do this, so first things first, bass trapping. Bass trapping, always number one priority. Total up the surface area of your room, and you want about 10% of this room covered in bass traps. And I'm looking in here, and I'm like, okay, the front two corners are pretty open right now. You could go with tri-traps for sure. Those are going to work. They can essentially be freestanding, because it certainly seems like he prefers freestanding versus mounted in this room, right? Instead of mounting his speakers, he's gone for stands. So the tri-traps could be freestanding in those front two corners. You don't really have spaces in the rear two corners, because there's a door on one side, there's equipment rack on the other, but the front two corners.
If that's where the equipment rack is going to stay.
I think it is.
I don't know. He said that nothing is set in stone, so
that's true. Yeah,
maybe it's not.
If you don't like the look of it being like diagonally going across those front corners in the tri-traps, GIK has their soffit traps, right? Just rectangular. They look like freestanding columns, or they just go in those two front vertical corners, and the soffit traps would work really, really well. I also think mounting some soffit traps on the upper perimeter of this room might work really well, because this isn't a huge room. You don't have a ton of floor space. You don't have a ton of wall space where there isn't something already standing. Using the wall to ceiling edges could be a really great way to add bass trapping to this room. Again, those could be tri-traps that you mount, or if you don't like the diagonal look, the soffit traps work really well. And I'm thinking mostly towards the front part of this room, just because the rear part of this room has like some things in the ceiling that the soffit traps or tri-traps
I don't know
might
what those things
into.
are. It looks like they're vents, maybe.
Yeah,
but
certainly
like
one is a
vents
vent.
in the front as well. It's a little
one
confusing.
might be a smoke detector, or maybe that's a AC outlet or something. But yeah,
you kind of that looks like some sort of detector. So you're going to be a little careful in here as far as how you're going to place things so that aesthetically it makes sense.
Yeah.
For those of you that aren't looking at the pictures, like I said, they're very confusing because of the fisheye lens or whatever's going on with it. But he's basically got his subwoofers in the midpoints of the side walls.
That's right. Love that.
So that is good. You could along the floor there on both sides, except for where the door is, obviously, have, or on one, maybe just the right side, have tri-traps.
Or soffit traps. Yep.
On the ground there. The one thing I would recommend before you really start ordering things is make sure you call. I know this seems to be a theme on this podcast as well. Call them, because they have dimensions. Yeah. And that dimensions isn't necessarily exactly correct on these things.
And you can do custom size too with them.
Yeah, you want to make sure, because if it were me, I would not want to, if I was going to put one in a corner floor to ceiling. Yeah. I would not want to have to mount it. I would just want to shove it in.
Although mounting the soffit traps is very easy. They're like keyhole mounts. Yeah. So those are very easy. But yeah, once you've addressed the bass trapping, we're going to do, Floyd tool pretty standard in here, because this is a rectangle of a room, if not a square of a room. Yeah. So front wall, right, behind all three of your front speakers, and you got the space since they're freestanding or on a center mount. You want 4 inches thick. You don't want to skimp out on the thickness here. So you want 4 inches thick, but I mean, the back of the speaker can be right against that 4-inch thick panel. So that is totally workable. But you want panels there. And I mean, the whole front wall is basically open with the way you have it right now. So
he can almost do a live end, dead end in here where, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for the way that they actually do it, but you could really over treat the front wall.
You could.
In order to just overall reduced decay.
Yeah, because there's going to be so much reflecting back and forth in this room that it is going to hit that front wall panel and do a lot of work. But I would personally want to have some panels behind the seats. And given that the window is right there, freestanding. Both GIK and Acoustimac offer freestanding panels. You don't have to do much more than that. 4 inches thick, please, or thicker. Thicker is good too if you can manage it, but at least 4 inches thick. Don't go thinner than that. in this room and with these speakers, because these are Martin Logan speakers, I'm not too worried about the sidewalls. I'm not that concerned. If you don't have any sidewall treatment in here, I'm not worried about it. If you have pretty heavily treated front wall and then directly behind your primary seats some freestanding panels, and then you have bass traps that we've done first, I don't think you need to do more than that. I think you're done.
Yeah. We are assuming that you're going to move these either couch or speakers so that they
I think it has to be
more properly placed, because it doesn't look like you can get in and out of the door.
He wanted to make sure, don't worry, don't judge that. Yeah. These aren't final placements.
I'm not. Yeah. But, in the pictures, the surround speakers are in front of the couch. I'm sure you're not planning on doing that.
That's right.
So they're in getting them a little bit off that back wall will also help as well. You could put a soffit panel or whatever tri-trap on the ground behind the couch. You could put some freestanding panels back there as well. Just sort of make sure you're catching those reflections off the back. I think this is a totally doable room as far as that. Yeah. I still think that you don't really need surround back speakers in a room this size, but whatever, you do you.
I'm really hoping we can do 2 more, which will definitely take us past 2 hours, but I'm really hoping we can do that.
I will tell you that I've got a lot of stuff to do today. We're catching up on family stuff that I have to do. Okay. Chris, after 15 years or so, the time has finally come for Chris to get an AV receiver upgrade, so he just bought himself a new Denon X3800H.
Yep.
The man knows the right model to buy. He's looking forward to trying out Atmos for the first time. To lower your expectations, my friend. He has a drop tile ceiling. I'd like to install some in-ceiling Atmos speakers, keeping the price under $200 a pair. He's been listening to us and paying attention. He very much wants rear enclosures on his or backer boxes on his in-ceiling speakers. So he looked up our usual suspects, the Monoprice Alpha with their middle backhands and the Sonos Mag 6 from Best Buy with the retrofit backhands. Guess what? Monoprice has completely discontinued the middle backhands that used to fit the Alpha and Amber series speakers. Call them.
No, he did.
Oh, did he?
They are
the
gone.
Sonos has discontinued the Visual Performance series and their backhands, which also fit the Mag 6 speakers. He called up both companies, and Monoprice said as far as backhands go, they only have the plastic ones that fit the Caliber series speakers now, and those do not fit the Amber
or Alpha. Yeah, they're
Alpha.
Both. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on a second. Amber series. And the Sonos said they are now offering their Visual Experience VX series that fully replaces the Visual Performance and Mag series. And indeed, Best Buy has a new Sonos VX series speakers with the new VX retrofit backhands for them, but they start at $400 a pair.
Yeah.
So Chris knows he is handy enough to make some backer boxes himself, and that is, if that's the only solution. The problem is finding the time to make them, which he does not have.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it is a problem.
Well, it's just the skill isn't the problem. The time is the problem.
I can't tell you how many people tell me, "Oh, I could do it myself, but I don't have the tools."
That's right.
Or the experience, or the ability, or whatever. But I saw a YouTube video, and it only took them 10 minutes.
I imagine I can do it.
Yeah. I imagine I can do a lot of things, and I cannot. He could get the Monoprice Caliber series speakers and their plastic backhands. He knows we always say Atmos speakers don't have to match your floor level speakers, and they don't have to be particularly great. But he has a Paradigm Studio speakers, and they're phenomenal. I'm sorry.
I mean, they are good. They are really good.
And he doesn't want the mismatch to be too terrible. With the Monoprice Caliber series, cut it. We always seem to indicate the Alpha series was worth paying a bit more when their metal backhands were still available. Mm-hmm. And then what else is there? Anything else a new at a low price with backhands available? I don't know what Rob's going to say here, but I am going to say that while I am sure the Caliber series speakers are not as good as the Alpha or Amber or whatever the heck it was that we were recommending before.
Yeah,
it is Atmos.
I know.
I do not care. It is so. I mean, even what was I watching? Oh, in Acolyte, they in the most recent, I think one of the more recent episodes, they had the sound, a voice coming from all around you and above you and everything else. And I mean, come on, my man. I mean, even then, it was all distorted and weird, and it was meant to be distorted and weird. Almost never is there an Atmos sound that's like, this is actually the voice of God, and it needs to sound exactly like Morgan Freeman, so you better have a floor standing speaker hanging from your ceiling. So I if you bought those Caliber series speakers, I bet you're going to be like,
yeah,
I'm just as unimpressed with Atmos as I thought I was going to be anyways.
So I'm so disappointed to have those Mag series speakers going away and the retrofit backhands, because that was such an easy recommendation and they worked so well with just about anything. Maybe the prices on the new VX series, the Visual Experience series, will drop precipitously in the not too long from now, but they're pretty darn brand new and there's no sales on them as of yet. Plus, the new backhands that they have for them are... I think they're still only $60 a pair, but you are paying for nothing. It's just a little bit of molded plastic and a tiny bit of Dacron inside of it. It's kind of a ripoff. So, yeah, I'm not super impressed with what Sonance just did there with those updates, and super disappointed by it. Disappointed that you can't get backhands readily available for that Alpha series, because that was a super easy recommendation. So, if this is purely about price and convenience, I don't really have a better alternative than to just try the Caliber series with those plastic backhands. I mean, at least it's costing you so little that, either selling them on or sending them back is like, barely a hassle. Other than that, like, gosh, these days there's barely any alternative. Monitor audio, you can get their fully sealed in-ceiling speakers, their CT260s. They come fully sealed. I like them for that, but they're $225 each, so they're twice the price, more than twice the price of what you were looking to pay. But there's nothing else. There's nothing else out there right now. I'm super disappointed by this. So I don't have a great alternative. I almost have to tell you, just go ahead. If it's more about price and convenience, try the Caliber series. I'm not over the moon about them. I did think the Alpha series was well worth the marginal increase in price. But yeah, it's a shame. So it's either that or get the Alpha series or the existing Mag 6s that are on clearance at a wonderful $130 for a pair of Mag 6s right now at Best Buy. You just can't get the retrofit backhands for them anymore, and then put in a little bit of time to make some backer boxes of your own. That's about the only way I can suggest going.
So given that he has a drop tile ceiling, he needs some sort of in-ceiling speaker bracket to support their weight, right? Mm-hmm. Any suggestions on what to use there? Could he just secure a piece of wood between a couple of T-bars in the ceiling and use that as a speaker support?
You could.
Oh, no. I mean, as long as the T-bars are rated for the amount of weight, because the speakers don't weigh that much. I think it's the plywood or whatever wood that you would have up there would be. You don't want something that's going to flex a bunch, so you really want like a piece of plywood to mount these things to, or drywall, I suppose. But those are flex too.
Are the speaker supports that are specifically made for this? I do. If this is, you're not sure exactly which speakers you're going to get. They're going to be around a 6.5-inch size, but you're not sure the exact model, because there sometimes are 1/4-inch, 1/8-inch differences, and that can make, unfortunately, a bit of a difference when you're mounting these. So there are universal T-bar speaker supports that you can get. One is from Terrapin. $39 each, which isn't the cheapest thing ever, but completely adjustable. You can adjust the diameter of the support. You can adjust where on the struts that the support circle goes, so that it doesn't have to be perfectly centered in a tile, right? It can be a little to the left or a little to the right, and then those crossbar struts can go anywhere where your T-bars already all are. So completely adjustable for $39 each. We'll have the link to those, and that would do the job, really, really well.
All right, we're going to do this last one. It's a long question, so I'm going to read fast.
It's great that we can do it.
And we're going to get through it.
Yes.
Vasanth from India. Vasanth. It's a fun name to say. Vasanth wrote this over a year ago when he was still running his 5.0.4 Atmos configuration using Wharfdale speakers for the floor level, including running the tower's full range with no subwoofer and Polk OMW3 height speakers. Mm-hmm. After listening to our advice and over 50 more AVRant episodes, he made made a few changes and wanted to share the results so far, plus ask a few more questions. First, he bought a subwoofer. It's a Polk PSW1110 that now resides in his front left corner. He's going to be asking a subwoofer-related question coming up later, so that I don't start immediately
That's right.
Or saying something. He switched from his Wharfdale front towers to Dolly's Zensor 1 front bookshelf speakers and a matching Dolly's Zensor center. He kept his wall-mounted Wharfdale surround speakers and his Polk height speakers. The new front 3 speakers and subwoofer in place, he redid his Odyssey setup using his Denon X3 700H. Oh,
so close.
But with a 5.1.4 configuration, and for the first time ever, all of his speakers are set to small.
Ah.
So before we get to his new questions, he really wanted to share how his family has reacted to the changes. His wife always used to keep the volume dial turned down to minus 25 or so, but after making the changes, she started turning the volume dial up, even when she was the only one watching, and started insisting that they turn on the Denon every time instead of just using the TV's built-in speakers sometimes. The kids used to watch their shows just using the TV speakers, but now they want to make sure the Denon is on every time too. They make a point of checking if the Denon standby light is red or green so they are sure. HDMI-CEC is supposed to take care of turning the Denon on and off along with the TV, but can we believe it? HDMI-CEC is not always 100% reliable. It's the first time we've heard that.
You're the only one, Vasanth. Never happened to anybody
I
else.
would complain to Denon. Since the Denon is what they check for, whether it's on or off, his wife started asking him what an even higher-end Denon might do. Vasanth was delighted to have her take an interest, so he showed her some of our AVRant episodes, and they even had a whole discussion about reference volume. Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which he highly recommends, was watched at -10 with their whole family let out a shout of surprise together at the end. I don't remember. I don't know what that is.
That's part of the Godzilla Kong universe. It's the part of that universe on Apple TV Plus.
All right. Master of the Air, which he strongly recommends for its excellent Atmos effects, was watched at -6. And Three Body Problem got the volume dial all the way up to 0, which had him biting his nails and worried about possible speaker damage, but thankfully everything went well. So it's been a blast. And now he has a couple of new questions. He knows we've never been huge Polk subwoofer fans, but we have to understand that price points are different in India, and even the smallest SP1000 sub from SVS costs the equivalent of $1,000. That said, when the volume dial was all the way up at 0, the one negative thing he noticed was Polk starting to struggle a bit. He isn't expecting a full bass pressurization. It's a living room after all. But he has been wondering if he could do a bit better on the subwoofer side of things. So one option he's come across is the Bic Acoustic PL300 is available at a reasonable price from Amazon India. It's quite a lot of positive reviews. I never trust subwoofer reviews on Amazon, including from Audioholics. So, considering all of it, do we think it would be a reasonable upgrade for him to get to replace his current Polk sub? I do not know this Acoustic. The problem is for those of you that didn't look at the pictures, his room is open to the rest of the house. Yeah. It is, and there's no treatments whatsoever anywhere. It's all very hard marble and hard walls. So there's a lot of bass bouncing around in here. Plus, there's no way to know what adding a second subwoofer. Before you guys think, that's what Tom's going to suggest. There's no way to know how much good or bad would happen by adding a second subwoofer in here. So replacing his current sub, which has really only got 2 viable locations, one of which has probably already been nixed because it's next to the TV instead of in the corner, kind of hidden away. I imagine that he's only really one viable location. So whatever he's got going on here is probably as far as location wise is what he'll be able to do. I doubt that he has the ability to put room treatments up, or we would be talking about that. And so let's just start with that. Tell me about the sub, Rob, because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like here. If you're ordering it in North America, you can get it for about $300. Right. And at that price, it is probably about the best that you can get. It's why it's garnered a lot of praise, including from Audioholics, because they're like, hey, if you're looking for the least expensive sub that we actually feel good about recommending, Brent Butterworth is on board with this too over at the Wirecutter. Like this is one of them. This is a really high value subwoofer. It is just flat out objectively capable of playing lower and playing the lower frequencies louder than the current Polk sub that the Vasanth has. That's just CEA 2010 measurements don't lie, and that is absolutely the truth. The thing is, Audioholics noted that in the 50 to 60 hertz region, where a lot of people are trying to get the most output, because, kick drum and stuff like that is there, that Bic actually designed that PL300 with a little bit of, DSP filtering built into the amp, not adjustable, but just built into that amplifier to keep it more linear than you might expect a $300 subwoofer to be. So there are subs that cost about the same or less. They don't go as low into the 20 hertz or 25 hertz region as the Bic PL300 does, but they actually play a little bit louder between 50 and 60 hertz. Again, CEA 2010 measurements don't lie, than the PL300 does. But the PL300 is a nice linear sub, and it does play lower, and it plays the lower frequencies louder than your Polk. So, I mean, objectively, that's what we can say you'd be getting, right? If what it was that you wanted some of the lower frequencies, that Bic is, or the Polk that you have right now, it's tapping out around 32 hertz. It's really not doing anything below that. Right. So you can get lower. You can get those lower frequencies louder for sure with the PL300, but don't expect a big upgrade in that, 40, 50, 60 hertz region. It's not tremendously different there. And a lot of the sort of hit you in the chest type of bass is in that sort of region. So, I mean, if this is a case where you can return the Polk and get the BIC in its place, I would personally do that. I think the BIC is the better subwoofer between the Polk that you have and the BIC, but I wouldn't necessarily expect a massive noticeable upgrade all the time, but it will play lower.
So this is the problem.
Yeah.
And Rob is well aware of this. So what he's telling you is true. This is you could make this, we'll call it a side grade. I don't know that's a huge upgrade.
Yeah, I would call it an upgrade, but maybe not quite as much as you're hoping for. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to remind you that in a room like this, that is, let's say, not optimal for bass.
But so I like what he's done in here. I really like what he's done in here.
I think so too. But not getting a more capable subwoofer can actually make your bass worse. Worse to you.
It's possible.
You're now going to activate room modes and have peaks and valleys in places that you did not have before.
Right.
So
everywhere below about 32 hertz.
Yeah. So if you get a subwoofer that's more capable and that plays lower, suddenly you'll be like, oh my God, why did my old less capable subwoofer sound better than this new one?
Possibly.
But we cannot predict that. So I am telling you this for, I guess, as a word of warning. Do not assume that a more capable subwoofer that plays louder and plays lower will necessarily sound better in your system. We can predict that if we have more control over your room. If you've got bass trapping, if you've got an enclosed, or even if you don't have bass trapping, if you've got an enclosed space that's rectangular and you will place the subs where we tell you to, we can predict that your bass will get better by getting a second one or getting one, getting two that are lower and play louder or you can pressurize the space. So there is a bit of a hesitation on my point.
We want to set and temper expectations to what they ought to be. Yeah.
So that's the only thing I'm going to say before you make this change.
Yeah.
And we do understand that it's easy for us to say, oh, just go buy an SVS, it's this and that. It's only costs $500. We understand that. And if you did have $1,000 US just lying around for the subwoofer, it might, in fact, sound much worse than what you have because it will be playing much closer to 20 hertz. And you might find, oh, my God, when it hits during these scenes where before I had no bass at these very low frequencies, I now have way too much. And now my subwoofer is actually needs to be lowered in volume overall so that when we get those notes, it is not blowing me out of my seat, but now all the rest of my bass is too low.
Could be, yeah.
So there's it's a really fine line here.
But I would just say I wouldn't steer you away from getting the BIC PL300 because I think it's a really high value sub for sure. So just factor in what are the financial risks, because if this is very low financial risk and you can easily return that Polk and get the BIC in its place, I'd certainly be willing to give it a try. And the last thing I'll say is if you do end up getting the BIC PL300, do not be tempted by the specs that say if you block one or two of the ports you can get even lower bass. Leave all three ports open, don't do anything else.
You want output, not depth.
That's right.
In a completely different setup, he's got a Marantz PM6005 integrated amp that he uses to power a pair of music speakers and his headphones. Music speakers. I know they just made them for music.
Well,
one of his sources is his Mac Mini with an M2 Pro processor, but that doesn't have an audio output that works directly with his Marantz integrated amp. So he's using an Audio Quest Dragonfly Red USB DAC, but that hasn't been working reliably for him for a few days now. He was considered getting a topping D10S DAC to replace it. Any other suggestions? Well, Rob was very nice to go to Amazon.in, which is of course in India, to find out definitively that there is, in fact, an Fosse option for you.
That's right. Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, by all accounts, your Mac Mini should have like a regular 3.5 millimeter headphone jack output.
Yes.
Now, the thing is, if you said, I already tried that and that actually has like a bit of a noise floor to it or something along those lines.
Would not be shocking.
Yeah, some weird volume thing I have to deal with inside the Mac computer, and I don't always want to do that because I want to change the volume on my integrated amp instead. If you've done those things and come across some issue using that 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, and all you need is a 3.5 millimeter stereo plug to RCA red and white cable adapter. No processing involved in that. That's just a cable with different plugs on either end. So if you haven't tried that, I would try that because you should have that 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Maybe he's already using it for something else. There's a plethora of reasons why that might not work. But if you just missed that that's what that little jack on the back of the Mac Mini is, that could be a possibility for virtually no money at all. So on the other side of it, if it's like, nope, I want USB output from my Mac Mini, but I need to turn that into red and white RCA jacks to plug into my AVRant's integrated amp, then yes, Fosse has their SK02. It is definitely available through Amazon India, and it does exactly what you need. It has a fabulous high-end DAC built inside of it. I can't imagine that if you look up what that ESS Sabre DAC is, that there'd be any way that you'd say, oh, I'm worried about the DAC quality. It's a fantastic DAC in there. I balked a little bit at the Fosse's price until I looked at the toppings price that you were considering, and the Fosse is less than half. So I don't think the price is a problem, even though I personally probably wouldn't even pay as much as the Fosse costs. But it has some really nice features. First of all, if you want to drive your headphones directly from the Fosse instead of going through your Marantz, you can do that because it is also a headphone amplifier and a really good one at that. But it also lets you set fixed line level with volume adjustment in the Fosse or not, because if you want all the volume adjustment to be done inside the Marantz or all the volume adjustment to be done inside the Mac, those are all options that you can do here with USB going from your Mac Mini to the Fosse and then RCA going from the Fosse to your Marantz. So the Fosse SK02 is the one I'll have a link for and the one I would recommend.
I don't know what is going on outside. I think there's thunder or something. I don't know. It's crazy. Who do we got left, Rob?
We have on our list here Max. Yeah, that's going to be a fun question digging through next week. Brad, Henry, and I think there was one more down here. Oh, Jay. I just wanted to mention.
Scrolling, guys.
Question came in, but well, because some of that is photos that we're going past here. Jay's came in on Monday, so I didn't actually write it all out there, but I wanted to let him know I did receive it. You guys will be next week.
All right, well, we got to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Brandon for going to AVRant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, as well as our 131 patrons over at Patreon.com.
Yes, for sure. Brandon, thank you so much for your PayPal donation. And Patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation if you'd like to. So a big thanks to our 131 patrons over there.
I also want to thank Dan, Sasi, and Greg for sending us notes of gratitude. Thank you for thanking us.
Yeah, I'll say those names one more time. Dan, Sasi, and Greg, thank you so much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement. We very, very much appreciate it. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.